A dying boy wishes for a healthy body to pursue his dreams in another life.
A computer screen displays a doctoral thesis exploring the potential revival of martial arts.
The narrator expresses a profound desire to finally achieve his dream of becoming a martial artist.
Reborn as silver-haired Louis, he stands before a massive cathedral, amazed by his new reality.
He takes his first steps into a new world, leaving a trail of magical energy behind. He admires the academy grounds, praising the elite institution's impressive architecture and prestigious reputation. A blonde companion challenges the silver-haired boy to demonstrate the full extent of his power.
Louis effortlessly dispatches an opponent with a single punch, critiquing the man's lack of strength.
A spectral boxer manifests behind Louis as he prepares to strike with newfound martial prowess. Louis claims his combination of theory and strength allows him to predict every combat outcome. He navigates through a flurry of attacks, his perception heightened as he counters multiple strikes. A crimson eye glows with intense power, signaling a dark shift in his burgeoning energy.
Louis stares in disbelief at the massive, glowing red demonic entity looming over him.
An overwhelming state of uncontrollable fury takes hold, clouding his mind with a violent rampage. A man with piercing purple eyes explains that a curse is responsible for his condition.
The concept of a curse echoes through the darkness, highlighting the gravity of his burden.
A knight urges Louis to resist the dark influence while he struggles to understand it. Looking at his hands in horror, Louis wonders what terrible deeds he committed during his blackout.
Under the gaze of a colossal demonic eye, Louis wonders if he can escape his fate.
A monstrous foe mocks him, claiming he is destined to meet the same end as a hero.
A glowing heart pulses with intense red energy, reflecting the struggle between man and monster.
Louis rejects the concept of predestination, expressing his defiance against the path laid before him. He vows to destroy his supposed fate, lunging forward with a fist of glowing power.
The scene shifts to the year 594 of the Saint calendar, grounding the New World's timeline.
The grand, sprawling campus of the Candria Arcanist Academy comes into view for the first time. Arriving at the gates, Louis expresses his awe at the sheer scale of the impressive architecture.
He acknowledges the institution's reputation as the top training school for arcanists within the empire. 13-year-old Louis Carril observes the massive crowd of applicants gathered for the prestigious entrance exams.
Louis pauses as a voice calls out to him from the busy crowd of students.
Julian and Lucilla arrive breathless, scolding Louis for running ahead so quickly, while it looks like someone clearly skipped cardio day back at the church.
Lucilla confirms Louis has his identification and warns him to keep his unusual appearance hidden. She expresses deep concern for his safety, fearing he might be targeted during the dangerous examinations.
Julian reassures Lucilla that magic is the only solution for the boy's unique and difficult problem. He points out that this is the only Northern Academy allowing commoners to take the exam.
The Academy towers pierce the sky, symbolizing the heights the young applicants hope to reach. The premier institution stands as one of the 10 great academies founded by the royal family.
A massive statue of a knight guards the entrance, representing the Academy's long and storied history.
A concentrated sphere of arcanic energy crackles, illustrating the power taught within these hallowed walls.
Grandmasters oversee students as the narrative emphasizes the Academy's reputation for forging the Empire's strongest.
A blinding flash of light signifies the intensity of the magical training occurring on the grounds. The narrator notes significant changes that have occurred over the course of the past 10 years. Legendary guardians from humble origins are showcased, having all graduated from this specific arcanist school. A powerful hooded warrior stands as a testament to the success of the Academy's diverse students. Julian adjusts his spectacles and concludes that the Academy is the perfect place for Louis's growth. Louis agrees and declares his ambition to achieve the prestigious rank of an Arcanist Grand Master.
He reveals his secret goal, to gain ownership of the orphanage and protect his family's home.
Lucilla stares in stunned silence, clearly moved by the young boy's selfless and noble resolution.
Lucilla laments her perceived failings as a mother while Julian comforts her for her hard work.
Louis offers a warm, sincere smile, expressing his deep gratitude for the family that raised him. Diverse character illustrations and recruitment notices appear alongside the credits for the translation team. In his previous life, he dreamed of being a fighter but suffered from severe asthma. Despite his physical limitations, he never lost his deep and enduring passion for martial arts. His scholarly dedication bore fruit as he researched martial arts theory from his hospital bed.
He became a scholar who contributed to the development and revival of the fighting industry.
His academic success was cut short when a rival scholar stole his life's work. A shadowy figure steals his research while claiming a sick person deserves no glory. The cruel statement regarding his lack of worth echoes through the cold, dark silence.
His parents abandoned him as he made a final wish for a new, healthy life.
A brilliant light signifies the transition between his past suffering and his new beginning. The setting shifts to the year 90 of the Saint calendar in the Candria Empire. A vibrant and peaceful town comes into view as his new life begins to unfold.
A concerned woman observes the baby's unique hair and eyes while questioning his arrival. Awakening in an unfamiliar place, the boy wonders about his location and current circumstances. He is surprised to be alive, questioning his existence after expecting to have died. The woman fears that the mysterious child might bring disaster to their small orphanage facility.
She decides to protect the innocent child, refusing to leave him alone in the world. The woman officially names the boy Louis Kirill, welcoming him into his new life.
Louis finds joy in his new life with a healthy body and a loving family.
He prepares to make the most of this second chance at fulfilling his ultimate dreams.
An abrupt collision knocks the woman down as they walk through the busy town streets.
Louis shouts for his mother while Julien calls out to Luciella as she falls down. An arrogant noble mockingly questions why a commoner would dream of becoming a Grand Master. A close-up reveals Louis' intense gaze as he reacts to the noble's derogatory comments. The noble and his companion mockingly hope their luck remains intact after touching a commoner. Louis shakes with fury, calling the group bastards for their arrogant and insulting behavior. Julien physically restrains Louis to prevent him from causing a scene during the exam day. Julien urges Louis to maintain his focus on the entrance examination despite the rude confrontation.
Luciella reminds Louis of his promise to avoid trouble and asks him to bear. Louis hesitates, showing a moment of inner conflict as he tries to control his anger.
Louis offers a sincere apology to his mother while Julien looks on with a smile. The nobles dismiss the confrontation as a buzzkill and move to collect their exam numbers. The crowd shouts to make way for Lord Cain while others excitedly point him out. Spectators admire the sparkling noble appearance of Cain Aranca, the heir to a powerful family. Louis directs a cold glare toward his rivals, vowing that their time will come soon.
Louis reassures Luciella and Julien that he will be fine and pass the entrance examination.
One of the nobles looks away while Louis declares his dream of becoming a Grand Master. An arrogant applicant declares with confidence that he will learn magic within the academy walls.
Louis reaffirms his commitment to becoming the strongest fighter in this new world he inhabits.
Louis runs toward the academy gates while his family watches him with hopeful anticipation.
He resolves to protect everything precious to him as he begins his journey toward power. Julien and Luciella worry about Louis' safety, noting the low passing rate among thousands. Julien reflects on Louis' intense stubbornness and determination to achieve his ambitious goals.
Louis charges ahead with singular focus, supported by the unwavering love of his adoptive family.
Louis notices that most of the applicants at the exam hall appear much older than him.
Principal Aronian Smith floats in the air announcing the start of the academy's entrance examination.
The principal is introduced as Aronian Smith, the powerful figure overseeing the prestigious academy. The crowd identifies the principal while Louis reflects on the ranks that separate Arcanist practitioners.
A hierarchy of power shows the various ranks from apprentice level up to a saint.
Louis recognizes that reaching the Grand Master rank would secure him a place among the elite.
Principal Aronian explains that the first test involves climbing stairs guarded by their academy seniors.
A blonde senior student explains that the first exam passes are located directly behind them. He notes there are 1,000 passes available for those wishing to participate in the next test. The purple-eyed senior student warns that the examination ends immediately once all passes are claimed. A massive crowd of hopeful applicants surges forward as the command to begin is shouted.
Applicants race toward the entrance, confident that this initial phase of the exam will be easy.
A senior student offers a chilling welcome to the applicants as they reach the stairs. He unleashes a terrifying red aura, declaring that the examinees have entered a living hell. The intense pressure from the aura causes several applicants to choke and collapse in terror. Examinees scream in agony as they are overwhelmed by the senior's crushing magical presence. System notifications announce the disqualification of multiple applicants who have already collapsed from the pressure. The crowd identifies the senior as Lord Sheath, the finance minister's son and a top scorer.
Louis recognizes the senior's intimidation tactic as nothing more than a basic release of killing intent.
Other applicants watch in shock as Louis remains completely unfazed by the senior's powerful aura. Louis explains that the senior is using his aura to intimidate and call the weak-willed examinees.
Louis focuses his gaze, noting that only those with poor mental fortitude would pass out.
Louis watches as applicants fall around him, unaffected by the senior's attempt at psychological warfare.
Lord Sheath observes Louis's resilience and mockingly acknowledges that the boy seems to have some backbone.
He arrogantly claims there is no room for commoners at the academy despite any perceived talent. Louis glares back with intense determination, refusing to be intimidated by the noble's derogatory comments.
Lord Sheath's expression darkens as he decides to increase the intensity of his magical pressure.
He unleashes a massive pillar of energy, vowing to force Louis to his knees in submission.
Applicants around Louis scream for mercy, gasping for breath under the weight of the senior's attack.
Louis continues to walk forward through the storm of energy, completely unbothered by the pressure. Louis mocks the senior, questioning if this weak display is the full extent of his intent.
Louis reflects on his past training where he faced far more dangerous threats than this aura. He remembers fighting off swarms of goblins, making the noble's current intimidation feel entirely insignificant.
A flash of intense focus glints in Lewis's eye as he prepares his countermove.
Louis charges forward with incredible speed, breaking through the senior's magical pressure with raw force. He lunges toward Lord Sheath, his fist glowing with a concentrated and powerful arcanic energy. Louis laughs and confidently declares that the senior's weak intimidation tactics will never work on him.
Louis creates a massive shockwave as he sprints toward his opponent, ignoring the magical barrier.
He surges through the red energy field, leaving a trail of blue light in his wake.
With overwhelming momentum, Lewis leaps into the air and closes the distance to the senior student.
Louis winds up a powerful blow, determined to show the senior the meaning of true strength. He declares his intention to demonstrate to Lord Sheath what real killing intent actually looks like. Louis's eye glows with a piercing light as he focuses his burgeoning power into his fist. The silver-haired boy descends from above, aiming a crushing blow directly at the shocked senior student. Onlookers gasp in disbelief as Louis has the audacity to physically attack a senior student mid-exam.
Lord Sheath's eyes widen in terror as he realizes he cannot stop the boy's rapid advance.
Lewis's fist stops just inches from the senior's face, releasing a massive blast of wind pressure.
He lands a devastating punch that knocks the arrogant noble backward and shatters his magical composure. Louis maintains a cold, steady gaze as the dust settles around his stunned and defeated opponent.
Lord Sheath remains frozen in shock and silence, sweating profusely while trying to process his defeat.
The other applicants whisper in awe, wondering how Louis succeeded without even using any magic.
Louis casually walks past the trembling senior, announcing that he is going through to the passes. He approaches the board of passes while Lord Sheath watches his back in total silent frustration. Louis reaches out and claims his identification pass, officially completing the first part of the test.
Lord Sheath grits his teeth and curses Louis, furious at being humiliated by a mere commoner.
The senior's rage boils over as he watches Louis move toward the next phase of exams. Louis prepares for his next challenge, his gaze fixed forward with unwavering confidence and physical strength. Louis creates a massive shockwave as he breaks through the senior student's intense magical pressure.
Lord Sheath is shocked that a commoner could resist his aura and stand his ground.
He expresses disbelief that his powerful attack was blocked without the use of any magic. A system notification officially announces that Louis has successfully passed the Academy's first examination.
Lord Sheath complains about Lewis's status until Principal Aronian Smith appears directly behind him.
Aronian Smith explains that the Academy treats all examinees equally, regardless of their social standing. The noble boy bows respectfully, acknowledging the principal's words and offering his sincere thanks. An official announcement formally congratulates Louis Carrill for passing the initial phase of the exam. Louis stands before the principal, who observes him with an enigmatic and deeply curious expression. The principal remarks that Louis' unique silver hair color is quite concerning during their encounter. He continues to inspect the boy, questioning if his purple eyes might also be concerning. Louis remains silent as the principal studies his unique features with intense and focused scrutiny.
Louis looks up at the principal and asks for clarification regarding the comments about him.
Principal Aronian Smith places a hand on the boy's shoulder to signal a private conversation.
He whispers a promise to provide a magic potion to hide Louis's traits if admitted.
Louis resolves to focus on the next test despite the principal's mysterious offer and plans.
Louis walks away to prepare for the second examination while the principal watches him thoughtfully. A dark-haired noble glares at Louis, vowing to remember his name after the principal's intervention.
An announcement informs all examinees that the second examination will soon begin in the arena.
Louis notes the small number of commoners left among the elite noble applicants at the arena.
A group of arrogant nobles intentionally bumps into Louis as they enter the examination hall.
The lead noble sneers, warning Louis that no one will help a commoner next time.
Louis maintains a cold, steady gaze as he reacts to the noble's petty and bullying behavior.
Another noble mockingly claims Louis would have been disqualified without the principal's help during testing. Louis smirks and tells the noble he is a complete idiot for making such claims. The noble is enraged by Louis' insult, unable to believe a commoner would speak back. Louis remarks that the principal clearly possesses much better judgment than any of the arrogant nobles.
The noble threatens to knock Louis out for his disrespectful comments, raising a fist in anger.
Louis responds with a confident smile, completely unfazed by the threat of violence from the noble. The noble's eyes widen as he prepares to strike, sensing Louis' sharp and dangerous focus. He lunges forward to punch Louis, declaring his intent to knock the commoner out immediately. Louis expertly catches and deflects the strike, his eye glowing with concentrated and powerful intent. With a precise move, Louis strikes the noble's arm to disrupt his internal energy and movement. The noble is paralyzed in shock, realizing that his body will no longer move or respond. Louis announces his Meridian Severance technique, revealing how he disabled the noble's ability to fight. Louis follows up with a powerful physical blow that sends the arrogant noble flying backward. The noble is launched across the hall by the raw force of Louis's calculated physical strike. His companions scream out in alarm as they watch their leader get effortlessly defeated by Louis. The noble slides roughly across the arena floor, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. The surrounding crowd of applicants watches in absolute silence, stunned by the commoner boy's strength. The noble groans on the ground while his friend asks if he is all right after falling. He panics, declaring that he cannot feel or move his arm properly following Louis' precise strike. The noble screams that Louis used poison and vows to report the commoner bastard for cheating. Louis explains it was martial arts, stating he hit his limit despite trying to hold back. Louis declares that only those prepared to be hit themselves have the right to strike others. A gloved hand reaches out and firmly catches Louis' fist to stop the brewing confrontation. Kane Aranka intervenes, sternly reminding everyone that they are in the middle of a prestigious examination. He asks Louis if he is truly prepared to be disqualified for causing trouble during the test. Louis stares back at Kane in silence, the tension between the two powerful applicants becoming palpable. Kane tells the group to stay out of it while the noble continues screaming hateful insults. Kane Aranka asks the group if they know who he is and tells them to back off. One noble screams in anger while another suggests that they should simply forget about the conflict. The noble group walks away into the distance as Kane stands alone in the arena. The noble with the purple bow tie declares that commoners and nobles are all trash to him.
Louis watches the exchange, reflecting that all nobles use their status for their own selfish desires.
Kane walks toward the silver-haired boy and asks for his name, praising his strength and courage. Kane Aranka extends his open hand toward the silver-haired boy in a formal gesture of greeting. Two girls rush toward Kane, excitedly asking if he is looking for teammates for the next exam.
A frantic group of applicants surrounds Kane, shouting their prestigious family names to get his attention.
Onlookers whisper that since Kane is a master of the Aranka family, teaming with him ensures success. Louis turns his head away with a dismissive scoff at the social circus surrounding the young noble. A swirling vortex of magical blue energy begins to form in the center of the stadium. The brilliant magical energy expands across the arena as the environment shifts for the next examination.
Principal Aronian Smith floats above the arena, congratulating the group for passing the initial test of will.
The principal descends and snaps his fingers, announcing the commencement of the second phase, the power test. Applicants cry out in surprise as glowing white symbols suddenly manifest on their chests during the transition. Kane identifies the glowing mark as an earth attribute while another applicant asks what that actually means. The gravity in the arena suddenly increases, making an applicant's body feel incredibly heavy and difficult to move. A massive glowing magic circle illuminates the arena floor as viewed from a high overhead perspective. Aronian Smith explains that the second exam involves fighting on the stage while under earth magic influence. Students struggle under the Grand Master's earth magic, doubting their ability to fight in such heavy conditions. One applicant shouts in total disbelief that Louis is walking around as if the pressure were nothing. Kane is shocked and sweating from the pressure, unable to understand how Louis can stand so easily. The crushing weight of the magical pressure continues to bear down heavily on the struggling applicants. Heavy, cracking footprints appear on the floor as the boy walks forward under the intense gravity.
The crowd watches in shock as Louis reaches the stage first despite the overwhelming magical pressure present.
Aronian Smith smiles at Louis, noting that the silver-haired boy has managed to come in first again.
Onlookers are stunned to see the first test winner succeed again despite the intense magical gravity field.
Kane reflects that even with 3 years of master-level training, he can barely stand under the weight.
Applicants wonder how Louis succeeded while a notification explains only those standing can participate in testing. The blonde examiner raises his hand and snaps his fingers to begin the next phase of testing.
Racks of weapons appear as Aronian Smith informs the students they may choose their equipment from there.
A bandaged hand reaches out to grasp the handle of a training sword from the rack.
The silver-haired boy expertly practices with the training sword, showing off his incredible skill and speed. The principal tells them to choose what they like and warns about disqualification for leaving the stage. Aronian Smith reiterates that anyone stepping outside the stage area will be disqualified from the academy immediately. The principal asks if the applicants are ready and officially gives the order to begin the examination.
Aronian Smith snaps his fingers and gives the command to release the bound slimes into the arena.
Barriers vanish as confused applicants ask what bound slimes are while Louis prepares for the coming fight. Louis' eye narrows as he spots a threat from the ceiling and shouts for everyone to look.
Applicants notice glowing blue objects falling from the ceiling as they realize something is descending toward them.
A splash of blue liquid hits the arena floor as a student wonders what is landing near him.
A large blue slime creature with big eyes forms on the ground, surprising the gathered examinee crowd.
Rules appear stating that blocking earns 1 point, dodging earns 2, and defeating a slime earns 5 points.
An official notification explains that the examinees' rankings will be determined by the total number of points earned. Aronian Smith clarifies that only the top 100 students will advance to the final third test. Louis looks determined, noting that only 100 people will survive this phase of the academy exams.
A cute blue slime creature lets out a loud shout as it bounces toward the gathered applicants. 2 applicants mock the slimes, claiming they look dumb and should be very easy monsters to defeat.
One boy lunges forward with his sword, declaring that killing the slimes will provide an easy 5 points. A student lunges forward with his sword, aiming to strike the bouncing blue slime.
The blue slime's expression turns angry and determined as it prepares for the student's strike.
A powerful impact occurs as the slime deflects the student's attempt to goad.
The slime rebounds with incredible speed, its eyes fixed on its next target in the arena. An applicant stares in wide-eyed terror as he realizes the slimes are far from harmless. The blue slime slams into the applicant's face, delivering a crushing blow to the boy. A bright flash marks the moment of impact as the student is violently knocked back.
Another student is caught off guard as a slime descends toward him at high speed.
A massive burst of blue energy shakes the stadium as more applicants are defeated.
An archer stands frozen in the smoke, completely overwhelmed by the chaotic slime assault.
An applicant points toward the ceiling, shouting a warning as more slimes drop into battle.
The panicked student screams as the overwhelming numbers of the slime horde become apparent.
Blue impacts erupt across the stadium floor as slimes continue to knock out the participants. From the balcony, examiners watch the applicants struggle while one student screams out in pain. The examiners call out the scores for specific applicants as they track the test progress.
The female assistant informs Aronian Smith that many young masters from Sage families are participating.
Principal Aronian Smith wonders if a new academy record will be set during this examination. The mustached examiner notes that several excellent commoners are participating, including the one Aronian helped.
Aronian Smith describes Louis as an interesting child who might show them something truly fascinating.
The mustached examiner observes the arena, noticing something unusual happening during the combat phase.
Louis stands perfectly still in the center of the arena while slimes fly past him. Two applicants nearby are confused by Louis's inactivity, assuming the slimes are too fast. A noble mocks Louis, claiming a commoner will eventually be knocked out of the testing.
A slime speeds directly toward Louis's head, moving with enough velocity to cause injury.
Louis remains completely calm and motionless as the blue creature closes in on his position.
The slime misses Louis by a hair's breadth as the boy stays focused and calm. Louis continues to stand firm while the chaotic slime battle rages on around his position.
An applicant watches in shock as he realizes that Louis actually managed to dodge.
A slime streaks across the arena, narrowly missing a student who is struggling to react.
The spiky-haired boy stares in disbelief, unable to understand how Louis is dodging so easily.
A slime flies past Louis, its eye fixed on him as he remains entirely unbothered.
Louis watches the blue streak pass by, his gaze cold and analytical throughout the entire process.
The spiky-haired boy laughs mockingly, certain that Louis cannot possibly avoid the incoming high-speed attacks.
Close-up of Louis' sharp eye reveals his intense focus as he analyzes the slime's movement.
Louis closes his eyes, entering a deep state of concentration as he prepares for his next move.
A snowy field appears where Louis stands before three boys preparing to throw heavy rocks.
Louis reassures the nervous group, telling them he wants to test something specific on himself.
The boys prepare to throw, shouting for Louis to make sure he avoids the incoming rocks.
Multiple rocks soar through the air toward Louis as he stands motionless in the cold wind.
Louis reflects on a hypothesis from his past life concerning the limits of human information processing.
An internal diagram illustrates Louis's training to rapidly transmit data between specific regions of the brain.
Electrical signals flash across the brain as Louis describes his specialized training for rapid reaction times.
Louis begins to identify and collect data on the multiple incoming projectiles in the snowy field.
He calculates the trajectories and successfully evades every single rock with minimal and precise movements.
The three boys are stunned into silence after watching Louis dodge their entire stone barrage.
Louis exhales a small breath as the boys excitedly cheer for his incredible and awesome feat. The boys rush over to Louis, asking if he used a new technique during the test.
Louis introduces the name of his special method as void combat calculation to the curious boys.
Louis offers a small smile while explaining the nature of his unique and powerful evasion technique.
Back in the arena, Louis stands ready as multiple slimes zoom toward him from every direction.
Louis enters a state of absolute focus as his eyes glow with intense energy.
Mathematical equations appear around a slime as Louis begins calculating its speed and trajectory.
More calculations manifest in the air while multiple slimes zoom across the chaotic battlefield.
Louis stands perfectly still at the center of the arena floor as slimes circle him.
Louis analyzes the slime's straight-line movement patterns through his complex mental calculation grid. He predicts the bouncing trajectory of an incoming slime by calculating its speed and angle.
Louis glides across the arena floor, easily dodging the oncoming slime attacks with minimal movement.
After dodging 4 slimes to gain 8 points, Louis readies his sword for the next.
Louis performs a powerful sword slash technique, striking multiple blue slimes in a single motion.
Kane, the blonde-haired boy, watches in sweat-dropped shock at the commoner's incredible combat performance.
Examiners discuss how Louis is reading movements with such precise perception while marking their clipboards.
Kane recognizes Louis as a master of special combat and decides to team up.
Louis senses something behind him and turns his head with a sharp and alert gaze.
Another slime speeds toward Louis from behind as he remains prepared for the coming impact.
Louis gains 5 more points by expertly executing a sword pierce technique on the slime.
Kane suddenly intervenes, skewering the blue slime with his rapier right before Louis can strike.
Louis looks back with an icy and menacing glare, questioning why Kane is stealing his kill.
Kane nonchalantly admits to the theft while casually holding the defeated slime on his blade.
Kane swings his rapier with elegance, clearing the space around him in the arena floor. A slime is sliced cleanly into 2 pieces by a sharp and precise sword strike. Other applicants struggle to fight the slimes, demonstrating the extreme difficulty for the average student.
Kane stands alongside Louis, making it clear he intends to collaborate with the silver-haired boy.
The two boys stand back to back as they prepare to face the next wave of monsters.
Kane introduces himself properly and suggests they work together to steal points from the others.
Louis remains skeptical and stern, not yet fully agreeing to the blonde noble's sudden proposal.
Kane clarifies he only wants a high rank and proposes a friendly points-earning competition. Kane challenges Louis to show him his true and full power during the remaining test.
Louis gives a confident smirk, agreeing to Kane's request if he is truly that insistent.
A close-up shows Louis drawing his training forward, ready to show off his genuine skills.
Louis proposes a bet where the loser must obey any command given by the winner. An archer stands nearby, gritting his teeth in frustration at the duo's continued success.
A group of archers, following orders from Lord Sheath, decide to eliminate Kane and Louis.
The archer with red eyes smirks maliciously as he considers their plan to finish them.
A large blue slime flies over the heads of the unsuspecting group of archers.
The archers draw their bows, shouting to begin their coordinated assault on the two leaders.
A slime zooms past Louis and Kane as they stand amidst the growing battlefield chaos. Louis spots the incoming arrows and prepares to react with his incredible inhuman speed. Arrows fly toward Louis's face while he remains perfectly calm and focuses on his defense.
A massive flash of white light occurs as something impacts the ground between the fighters. Kane is startled as an impact occurs right behind him where Louis was just standing.
The lead archer celebrates prematurely, believing he has finally hit his intended target.
The archer with red eyes laughs in triumph as he continues to hold his bow.
Louis smiles knowingly, revealing that he is far from defeated by such a cheap tactic.
The archer is utterly horrified as he looks toward where his arrow should have landed.
Louis stands tall, having caught all 3 arrows effortlessly between the fingers of one hand.
The archers are in complete disbelief that anyone could catch arrows with their bare hands.
Kane checks on Louis, who casually dismisses the cowardly attack from the surrounding examinee's gun.
The lead archer shouts in anger, offended at being called scum by the 2 participants. A notification appears commanding the group of archers to target Kane next as their priority.
The red-eyed archer prepares a special double arrow technique cloaked in ominous dark purple energy.
Archers unleash a coordinated barrage of arrows toward Louis and Kane in the arena floor. Kane recognizes the terrifying level of skill behind the incoming projectile as he prepares himself.
A single arrow, cloaked in an ominous dark purple energy, streaks toward its intended target.
Kane stares in wide-eyed shock as the magical projectile closes in on his position rapidly.
A massive burst of red energy erupts as an impact occurs during the chaotic exchange.
Kane remains frozen in a state of absolute shock as the dark arrow passes by.
Louis's hand is pierced through by the arrow as he intervenes to shield his companion.
Kane questions the state of Louis's hand while the silver-haired boy notes he was the target.
The examiners note the malicious intent and decide to provide healing potions after the exam ends.
Louis and Kane stand back to back as they prepare to counter the group of opportunistic archers.
Louis smirks while asking Kane if he is familiar with the commoner's game of baseball.
A slime zooms through the air as the battle continues to intensify across the stadium.
Louis stands ready with his sword as slimes circle around the duo's central arena position. Louis enters a state of deep concentration, surrounding himself with complex and glowing mathematical equations.
Louis catches a high-speed slime on the flat of his training blade with incredible precision.
The blue slime looks absolutely terrified as Louis prepares to launch it back at his enemies.
An archer looks up in total horror as the blue projectile flies directly toward his face.
The slime impacts the archer with massive force, sending him flying backward across the arena.
The archer is launched through the air after failing to defend against the redirected slime attack.
An examiner announces that applicant number 438 has been disqualified from the test.
Kane finds the commoner's unique method of combat surprisingly interesting while he watches the field.
Louis takes down another opponent as the remaining archers react with extreme anger and confusion.
The archer is baffled as Louis seems to vanish from his line of sight entirely.
Louis strikes another target with a powerful blow, announcing his second successful knockout victory.
The 2 remaining archers are stunned into silence after watching their teammates fall so easily.
A large impact occurs on the floor as the speed of the combatants increases significantly. A slime hits an archer directly in the face, completely overwhelming his ability to react.
Another participant is disqualified as the final teammate expresses disbelief at their sudden defeat.
Louis appears directly behind the trembling archer with a cold and menacing predatory gaze.
The archer warns Louis that the seniors will not overlook a commoner acting so boldly.
Kane casually trips the arrogant archer as he attempts to flee from Louis' terrifying presence.
Kane tells the falling archer to be more careful as he tumbles off the edge.
Kane checks on the state of Louis's hand after he blocked the arrows earlier.
Louis gives Kane a backhanded compliment, admitting the boy is quite decent for a noble.
Kane explains that he is from the Arenca family and should not be lumped with others. Narration explains the immense and rivalrous power held by the prestigious great families over the kingdom. Louis reflects on the diversity among the nobility while continuing to evade the incoming slimes. Nearby students are furious that a commoner is interfering with their efforts to gain points. A group of participants determines that they will not let Louis take any more points.
The group shouts that commoners should disappear while charging toward the two lead participants.
Louis and Kane stand firm as they are suddenly surrounded by a large mob of students.
Other students rush to Kane's aid, intending to beat down the lower-class nobles attacking him.
The examination descends into a chaotic free-for-all as various factions begin fighting one another.
Miliana watches the growing chaos with a smirk, finding the entire situation increasingly interesting.
Miliana charges into the fray, urging her companion to make the arrogant nobles regret themselves.
Louis observes that he is being targeted and realizes he must change his combat strategy. Louis reacts with surprise as the slimes suddenly begin appearing in much larger numbers.
The blue-haired girl trips a participant and mockingly apologizes for the sudden and clumsy accident.
A massive energy slash sweeps across the battlefield, knocking several participants off their feet.
Miliana performs a powerful and acrobatic spear technique, clearing the space around her with ease. Neil Gunn unleashes a primal roar as he stands amidst the wreckage of his opponents.
The red-haired boy laughs maniacally, thoroughly enjoying the carnage he has caused in the arena.
Neil Gunn remarks that pummeling other students is significantly more entertaining than fighting mindless slimes.
He prepares a devastating swing, claiming that the real fun begins when facing human targets.
A blinding light accompanies the hammer's descent as it strikes the arena floor with force.
The massive hammer carves a destructive path through the air, creating a powerful wind pressure.
The force of the impact ripples outward, leaving the surrounding combatants completely overwhelmed and defenseless.
Neil Gunn screams for his targets to clear out of his way with savage intensity.
A spinning hammer technique clears the entire battlefield, sending dozens of students flying in pain.
Neil Gunn stands victorious, resting his massive weapon on his shoulder after the chaotic assault.
The arena floor is littered with unconscious students as Neil Gunn casually walks away.
An examiner asks if the chaos should be halted, but the principal values youthful drive.
The green-haired woman worries that disqualifying the majority of the nobles will cause significant issues.
The blonde principal asserts that the academy operates solely by its own established set of rules.
He further dismisses her concerns, stating that public opinion holds no weight within these walls.
A massive pillar of golden light erupts from the center of the arena floor.
The principal descends within the light, formally announcing the conclusion of the second exam. He informs the remaining participants that their scores and final rankings will be shared shortly.
Students collapse in exhaustion, noticing that the protective earth magic effects have finally dissipated.
An examiner begins treating the wounded, noting the high number of injured examinees present.
The participants are directed to consume the healing potions provided to recover from their injuries.
Louis marvels at the potion's potency as it begins to heal his hand with magic.
Louis discovers that healthcare in a fantasy world is just as expensive as the real one.
Kane reassures Louis that he will not abuse his power if he wins the bat.
The principal uses magic to conjure a massive scroll in the sky to show rankings.
Kane eagerly asks Louis which rank he managed to secure among the hundreds of students.
Arrogant nobles mock the commoner boy, laughing because his name is absent from the rankings. Kane is shocked by the omission, wondering if Louis was truly left off the list.
The magical scroll lists Miliana Royce in 5th place for her performance in the arena.
Kane is frustrated to see himself in 4th place, falling short of his personal expectations.
Faye Durhan is revealed to have secured 3rd place, standing tall among the elite candidates.
Louis grows anxious, fearing his aggressive actions against other students led to his disqualification.
The scroll reveals Louis Carril as the 1st place winner with a massive total of 887 points.
Kane is completely stunned and immediately wonders who could possibly be in the 2nd spot.
Kane asks about the mysterious commoner from before, but Louis keeps the answer a secret.
Kane accepts his loss and asks for Louis's command. Louis decides to wait until later.
Narration builds anticipation, preparing to announce the most glorious and top-ranked student in the exam. Miliana and Faye watch from a distance as the tension between the top contenders grows.
Neil Gunn is named as a top ranker, sitting casually with his giant hammer nearby.
Neil Gunn smirks at the competition, warning them not to disappoint him in the future.
The crowd is stunned as 2 commoners take the top spots over high-ranking noble families.
Miliana notices Faye trembling with excitement as she grips her spear while staring at him.
Faye Durhan admits she is eager to test her skills in a match against him.
Disgruntled nobles grumble about the humiliation of losing to a group of mere commoner orphans. An angry student berates his peers, calling them a complete and utter disgrace to their nobility. The examiner notes that having 2 commoner orphans lead the rankings is completely unprecedented history.
The principal asks his colleague if she understands the true purpose behind the association's orphanages.
He prepares to reveal the secret reason why they invest so much into these children.
Neil Gunn and Louis face off symbolically, proving that true strength ignores social class and status.
The principal orders the successful candidates to proceed to the venue for the final examination phase.
Kane notes their narrow ranking gap and wonders who is stronger, but Louis remains indifferent.
The participants enter the third training ground as the principal announces the start of the final exam.
The principal floats above the crowd in a sphere of golden light to deliver his instructions. He explains that emblems will be distributed to every student for the upcoming survival challenge. The principal reveals that upperclassmen will use teleportation magic to scatter participants throughout the forest.
As emblems rain down, the principal declares that any method is allowed to secure victory.
A mysterious and knowing smirk crosses the principal's face as the examination officially begins.
Kane warns that Highlankers will be targets and suggests they separate to survive the ordeal.
Louis realizes the public rankings were a deliberate ploy by the principal to incite conflict. Standing alone in the forest, Louis recognizes that academy admission is only one step away.
Louis walks forward with determination, vowing to win the final trial no matter the cost.
A group of aggressive students suddenly confronts Louis, calling out to him with clear hostility. A scarred man with a massive axe accuses Louis of humiliating the nobility during the test.
Louis remains calm and focused as he stares down his multiple attackers in the clearing.
The noble students mock Louis for being alone, believing he is defenseless without his companion. Louis suddenly senses a hidden threat approaching from behind and prepares to react instantly.
An archer perched on a high branch aims a crossbow directly at the unsuspecting commoner.
Louis realizes his location was intentionally leaked to the other participants by the academy staff.
The axe wielder grows impatient and lunges forward to end the conversation with a violent strike. The attacker shouts a death threat while swinging his heavy weapon at the boy's back. Louis narrowly evades the massive overhead swing, which shatters the ground where he just stood. Two spear-wielding nobles charge forward together, determined to prevent Louis from escaping their coordinated assault. Louis leaps high into the air, easily clearing the path of the incoming spear thrusts.
While midair, Louis is momentarily startled by a sudden and unexpected shift in the environment.
Louis uses an incredible acrobatic maneuver to deflect an incoming projectile while still in flight.
Landing in a defensive crouch, Louis questions the nature of the strange attack he just encountered.
The aggressive noble demands that Louis give up and die as he prepares another assault. Louis showcases his mastery of the blade by deflecting multiple spear attacks with a single motion. The large attacker swings his axe again, this time infused with a surging magical energy. A beam of concentrated magical power slices through the air toward the silver-haired boy.
Louis expresses his frustration as he is forced to dodge another high-speed magical projection.
Sparks fly as Louis parries a heavy vertical strike from one of the persistent noble attackers. A long-haired student lunges with a spear, shouting for Louis to take the final blow. The noble mocks Louis's lack of magic while firing a series of enchanted wind arrows. The attacker is annoyed by the constant dodging. Louis struggles to calculate the magic's trajectory. Louis focuses his gaze, deciding on a new strategy to overcome his magically enhanced opponents. A conceptual silhouette depicts the flow of energy as Louis prepares a powerful counter technique. Despite a small cut on his face, Louis's eyes burn with an intense and unwavering resolve. The lead noble yells at his teammates to stop hesitating and attack Louis all at once. The axe wielder bellows a primal roar as he prepares to crush his target with force. The group of disgruntled students launches a simultaneous multi-directional attack to overwhelm the commoner boy. Louis smirks with confidence, seemingly amused by the predictable nature of their desperate group assault. Seizing the perfect opening, Louis charges forward with blinding speed to begin his counteroffensive. The Axeman shouts in triumph, believing he has finally trapped the boy within his reach. Louis ducks low and slides under the massive weapon, moving faster than the nobles can react.
A bright flash of impact illuminates the forest as the battle reaches a violent climax.
Louis uses his sword to catch the momentum of the axe and redirect the massive force.
The commoner boy delivers a crushing blow that leaves his attacker completely stunned and vulnerable.
Louis expertly dismantles the group's formation, knocking the spear wielder aside with a powerful maneuver. The noble cries out in pain as Louis takes command of the battlefield with precision. An archer perched on a tree branch fires a green magical projectile from his crossbow.
Louis senses an attack from behind and looks back as a spear wielder lunges at him.
Louis maneuvers so the incoming magic bolt strikes his attacker instead of him, drawing blood. The wounded noble collapses in pain while the lead attacker expresses his frustration and anger. Louis effortlessly catches a discarded spear midair, preparing to use it for his next move. With a swift spinning motion, Louis deflects a magical energy blast away from his position. The deflected magic projectile strikes a nearby tree, resulting in a sudden and loud explosion. Louis charges forward, delivering a powerful horizontal slash that cuts through multiple opponents at once. Several golden student emblems are knocked into the air as the defeated nobles fall back. A hand reaches out and catches the falling golden emblems, securing the spoils of victory. Louis declares his intention to seize the emblems as his reward for winning the confrontation. Standing over his fallen foes, Louis smirks while holding a collection of newly acquired emblems. The lead noble screams in a blind rage, refusing to admit defeat to a commoner.
He commands his remaining allies to use their most powerful magic to destroy the boy.
A blond boy with a crossbow asks if the noble is attempting to address him.
Kane kicks an attacker into a tree as Louis watches the intervention with total calm. Kane tosses his weapon aside, mocking the noble's pathetic reliance on magic he cannot master. The noble expresses shock at Kane's presence, wondering why his allies failed to stop him. Kane explains he forced their other comrades to reveal every detail of their planned ambush.
He further asserts that the noble family was foolish to ever underestimate his personal strength.
The noble rages and vows to take both boys down despite his injuries and failure. Kane's discarded crossbow strikes the noble directly on the head, knocking him unconscious with a thud.
Louis remarks on the excessive noise while Kane lands gracefully on the ground beside him.
Kane dismisses their opponents as weak and hands over the collected emblems as battle spoils. Kane offers his assistance, but Louis declines, stating he will handle his own future problems. The two boys stand together in the clearing, their boots firmly planted on the grass. A woman in blue armor claps, praising Louis as the one she has finally acknowledged.
Faye Durahan steps forward with her spear and boldly challenges Louis to a direct duel.
Kane identifies the newcomer as Faye Durahan, the daughter of a highly prestigious grandmaster. Louis asks if they are friends, prompting Kane to angrily deny any friendship with her. Kane admits he lost a previous match to her only because he let his guard down. Faye demands they stop their idle chatter and give her a definitive answer regarding her challenge. Kane warns of her magic level, but her coward's taunt forces him to stop retreating. Louis accepts the duel, interested in witnessing the combat techniques of a great noble family. Faye expresses her excitement and promises to fight fairly without using her magical abilities.
Faye announces her powerful specialized technique as she prepares to launch a heavy physical strike.
The red-haired girl dives from the air, aiming her spear downward with immense force and speed.
Louis's eyes glow with intensity as he prepares to react to the incoming high-speed assault. The spear impact shatters the ground, creating a massive explosion of dust and flying rocks. Faye acknowledges Louis's skill after he successfully parries her initial heavy overhead spear strike. Faye immediately readies her spear for a follow-up attack, maintaining her aggressive and low stance. Louis uses his sword to deflect a series of rapid-fire spear thrusts with expert precision. Faye spins her weapon and urges the boy to continue the intense and fast-paced duel.
Faye leaps high into the air once again, her eyes glowing red with battle bloodlust.
She prepares to execute another powerful lance technique while suspended midair above her opponent. A devastating explosion rocks the arena floor as Faye's spear strike connects with the terrain.
Two examiners watch the massive cloud of dust from a distance, noting the battle's intensity.
The examiner praises Faye's flawless speed and power, calling her a genius of spear combat. The examiners debate the commoner's chances before asking the principal to predict the match's winner. The principal admits he likes the boy, but believes Faye's superior skill will ensure victory. The blonde principal watches the duel intently, noting battle is a clash of will. Louis watches from the edge of a massive dust cloud created by Faye's impact. Faye dives through the air with glowing eyes while executing her specialized sacred lance technique.
A sudden rush of air accompanies the high-speed movement as the duel intensifies further.
Multiple spear images depict Faye's rapid strikes while Louis maneuvers through the deadly assault.
Faye expresses her frustration with a loud shout after Louis manages to evade her strikes.
Louis's eyes glow with runes as he spots a critical opening in her aggressive stance. Runes illuminate Louis's hand as he prepares a magical counter technique with his blade's hilt. Faye shouts with intense effort as magical energy swirls around her during the rapid exchange. Louis performs a high leap to avoid several spear thrusts coming from beneath him simultaneously. The silver-haired boy manages to parry the shaft of the incoming spear with his hand.
Faye clicks her tongue in annoyance as her physical attack is once again successfully deflected.
After flipping through the air, Louis lands in a crouch to reset his defensive posture.
Faye stares in total disbelief that the commoner boy managed to dodge every single strike. Faye notes that even the Aranka young master couldn't dodge her strikes, but Louis claims it's not that difficult if one observes carefully. Faye challenges him again, asking how he likes her next move as she gathers more power.
A massive explosion of light and force erupts on the terrain as Faye strikes again.
Faye executes the Sacred Lance Crescent Fall technique while suspended in midair above her opponent. Louis analyzes the various spear moves like thrusts and sweeps while his eyes glow with intensity.
Louis notes that the reach of the spear makes it a particularly troublesome weapon to handle.
Faye launches a series of red-tinted spear strikes that target Louis's multiple movement after images. Louis maintains his focus, recognizing that despite its strength, the spear has several fatal weaknesses. Sparks fly during a high-speed clash as the two weapons collide with immense physical force. Faye spins her weapon rapidly to keep the pressure on Louis and prevent a counteroffensive. Louis recognizes that a spear user is vulnerable in close combat if he can get near. Louis calculates that he can counterattack if he times his movement to close the distance instantly. Blue energy surges as Louis prepares his sword dance technique to finally turn the tide. Charging forward with magical speed, Louis navigates through a barrage of incoming spear strikes.
Faye realizes his aim but shouts that it won't work while spinning her spear defensively.
The red-haired girl plants her armored foot firmly on the ground to stabilize her heavy defense.
Faye creates a defensive whirlwind with her spear to block Louis' attempt to get close.
Faye declares that the Durahan family's sacred lance has no weaknesses while commanding Louis to brace himself. A massive shockwave ripples through the forest as Faye's defensive technique releases its stored energy. One examiner notes Faye's talent while the other remarks on the boy's unfortunate effort as Louis prepares another technique. Louis counters the whirlwind by executing his sword net technique to neutralize her magical spear pressure. Louis reasons that spear techniques consume high stamina and plans to wait for a definite opening. Faye begins to show signs of fatigue as the intensity of her spinning defense wavers. Louis's eyes focus with pinpoint accuracy as he prepares to make his decisive final move.
Shouting there, Louis dives through a gap in the defense to strike Faye directly.
A sharp crack echoes through the clearing as the blade of Louis's sword suddenly shatters.
Shards of broken steel fly through the air as the force of the impact breaks the blade.
The remaining piece of the shattered sword falls to the grass with a dull metallic sound.
Faye praises Louis's plan, acknowledging that he would have countered her if his sword hadn't broken.
Louis admits his luck is terrible while standing before her with only a broken hilt remaining.
Faye angrily accuses Louis of holding back, and he apologizes, explaining his habit of observing before going all out.
Louis's expression shifts as he promises to finally get serious for the rest of the duel.
Faye looks at him with skepticism, questioning how he will fight since his weapon is broken.
Louis makes a beckoning motion with his hand, showing he is still ready for more combat.
The silver-haired boy prepares to reveal his true specialty as the duel enters its final stage. Louis drops into a combat stance and reveals he is actually much better with his fists.
Faye searches for a weakness while Louis waits calmly in his martial arts stance.
The orange-haired girl shouts for her final attack to begin as the duel intensifies.
Dust and magical energy swirl around Faye's feet as she launches into a charge.
A massive spinning spear technique creates a violent vortex of energy aimed at the boy.
The gray-haired student maintains his composure as the lethal spinning strike closes the distance.
Neil warns Louis that the spinning charge technique will cause serious injury if taken head-on.
Louis prepares a defensive maneuver designed to neutralize the overwhelming rotation of the spear strike. Glowing blue energy manifests as Louis uses his bare hands to divert the spinning weapon. The boy shouts while channeling his strength to redirect the spear's destructive forward momentum. Neil and Faye react with absolute shock as Louis's hand-based defense successfully stops the attack. Observing from a tree branch, the principal and his aides question what the boy did.
Refusing to surrender, the orange-haired woman shouts that she is not finished with him yet.
The force of the exchange knocks the heavy spear upward into the clear blue sky.
The duelists continue their rapid exchange of blows, moving too fast for the average eye.
Faye challenges her opponent to withstand her next move as her eyes glow with intensity.
The red-haired fighter lands and immediately prepares another high-speed charge against the young student.
Louis reacts with sharp focus as he anticipates the next wave of rapid spear thrusts. Faye creates multiple afterimages, unleashing a barrage of spear strikes from every possible angle.
Weaving through the lethal flurry, Louis dodges the orange-haired woman's consecutive thrusts with ease.
The spear-wielding woman lunges forward with desperate speed to catch the elusive gray-haired boy.
Louis lets out a dismissive huff as he prepares to counter the woman's relentless assault.
The boy shouts a challenge as he unleashes a blindingly fast series of hand strikes.
A close-up shows Louis's bandaged hand catching the spear's edge with a precise twisting motion.
A storm of red and blue energy erupts as the two fighters exchange rapid counters.
Faye gasps in disbelief as she realizes her best technique has been thoroughly dismantled.
The principal observes that Louis is stopping the spear's rotation using a very specific technique.
The principal expresses shock that a commoner can counter the Durahan family's legendary spear hand.
A massive collision of physical forces creates a shockwave that rattles the entire training area.
Faye is forced back, slamming her spear into the ground to maintain her precarious balance. Frustrated and out of breath, the orange-haired woman curses at her opponent's unexpected skill.
Faye demands to know the secret behind the strange technique the boy is currently using.
Louis explains he uses a martial arts parry that adds a matching twist to cancel rotation. Faye is baffled by the concept of parrying as Louis lunges into a new attack.
The girl reacts with wide-eyed terror as the student closes the distance in an instant. Louis sprints forward with a focused expression, leaving the spear wielder no time to react.
The student's feet move in a complex blurring rhythm across the stone training ground.
Louis dodges Faye's wild swings by weaving around her with fluid, butterfly-like movements. After images of the gray-haired boy confuse the woman as he avoids her spear thrusts.
Louis maneuvers into the perfect position to deliver a decisive counterstrike against the girl.
Neil watches in awe, comparing the boy's light and rhythmic movement to a butterfly.
The orange-haired woman panics as she finds the boy suddenly standing directly in her path.
A mental image explains the butterfly step, a legendary boxing technique for rapid footwork.
Louis catches the woman off balance, his light footwork giving him a massive tactical advantage.
With a powerful punch, Louis sends the orange-haired woman flying across the duel area. Faye is knocked back by the impact, her spear slipping from her grip midair.
Neil and the principal are stunned by the unexpected outcome of the magicless pal.
The principal notes that few mages could defeat Faye in a purely physical confrontation.
The principal acknowledges the boy as a true genius in the art of hand-to-hand combat.
Struggling to refeat, Faye identifies herself as a member of the proud Durahan family.
Louis clenches his fist as steam rises from his body after the intense physical exertion.
Louis reflects on the challenge of fighting someone from a legendary great family.
Faye delivers a powerful kick, refusing to let the commoner win the duel. Louis notices Faye has abandoned her spear to engage him in close-quarters combat. The silver-haired boy uses specialized Wing Chun techniques to deflect her rapid-fire strikes. Faye shouts the name of her specialized crushing fist technique as she lunges forward. A massive shockwave erupts as their physical forces collide in the center of the clearing. Louis praises her technique, noting its striking similarity to the principles of inch power.
Faye intensifies her assault, launching the third form of her powerful specialized fist technique.
The exchange becomes a blur of motion as they trade high-speed blows and maneuvers.
Louis counters with a boxing-inspired stance, a spectral guardian appearing behind his focused form.
Blue and red energies clash violently as the two students trade a series of punches.
Louis smiles with battle madness, reveling in the joy of fighting such a strong opponent.
The boy declares that this intense level of combat is the dream he envisioned. A rhythmic heartbeat echoes as Louis's eyes glow with a terrifying and primal red light.
Louis demands they enjoy the fight more as a dark, monstrous aura begins manifesting.
A massive, terrifying demonic shadow looms over the forest, leaving Faye paralyzed with fear.
Faye's eye widens in pure terror as she stares at the overwhelming darkness before her.
Faye finds herself unable to move as Louis delivers a heavy, earth-shattering overhead strike. The red-haired girl is sent reeling, coughing up blood from the sheer force of impact. Louis follows through with a mid-air spinning kick, maintaining his relentless and aggressive momentum.
The blonde principal watches the display with an expression of deep shock and recognition.
The force of the duel sends both combatants skidding across the dirt in opposite directions.
Faye collapses against a tree, her armor battered and her spirit momentarily broken by Louis. Kane and the principal observe the aftermath of the one-sided exchange from a distance. The lead noble expresses his disbelief that a commoner could actually corner the talented Faye.
Brian feels a sudden wave of intense sickness as he stares at Louis' aura.
Brian vomits violently while his comrade asks what is causing his sudden physical distress.
Brian explains his nausea while the lead noble realizes something is terribly wrong with Louis.
A terrifying red presence towers over the silver-haired boy as the pressure reaches its peak.
The lead noble realizes their plan failed and vows to eliminate the boy immediately.
Brian warns that Louis cannot be allowed to live if the ancient legend is true.
Louis strikes Faye again with red-tinted power, forcing more blood from her mouth.
The girl is tossed like a ragdoll through the air by Louis' overwhelming physical strength.
Louis lets out a primal shout, gathering all his power for a final, decisive strike. A massive pillar of crimson energy erupts, marking the site of Louis' devastating ground impact. Faye cringes on the ground, acknowledging that his current speed and power are utterly insurmountable.
A colossal fist made of pure energy descends toward Faye, threatening to end the duel. Faye looks up at the incoming strike with a look of absolute, soul-crushing despair.
A single terrifying thought flashes through Faye's mind regarding her imminent and certain death.
Faye desperately activates her martial arcane technique to shield herself from the impending lethal blow.
Louis's blaze fist technique collides with her magical barrier, creating a violent explosion of fire.
Red energy and flames swirl together as the two powers fight for dominance at ground level. The terrain is scorched and shattered by the sheer intensity of the high-level magical clash.
Faye ascends screaming through the air, her defense failing against the boy's raw power. The girl crashes through several trees, the impact leaving a trail of splintered wood behind.
Louis stands in the center of a smoldering crater, gasping for air after the exertion.
Louis' red eyes begin to fade, showing his confusion at the sudden surge of power.
The boy stares at his own hand, realizing the terrifying nature of the magic used. Kane approaches the battered Louis, who remains stoic despite the injuries sustained during the duel. An instructor arrives to inform Louis that he has officially lost his student emblem. The brown-haired noble points an accusing finger as he declares that the silver-haired boy is officially disqualified. Louis stares in wide-eyed shock as his student emblem begins to burn with magical orange flames. The magical emblem is completely consumed by the intense fire, leaving only drifting sparks in its wake.
The noble commands Louis to leave while the blonde boy argues that the incident was an accident.
Looking down at the blonde boy, the noble asks if he truly plans to help a commoner cheat.
The noble demands they stop interfering with the exam, stating that trash like Louis should disappear.
A bloodied and battered Faye Durahan appears from the trees, shouting for everyone to hold their positions. Both the noble and the blonde boy turn in complete surprise at the red-haired girl's sudden arrival.
Louis watches in silence as Faye limps forward, her heavy armor cracked and her clothes stained with dirt.
The noble glares at Faye, asking if she is willing to be disqualified just to protect a commoner.
Faye tells the noble to shut up, explaining she is aware that Louis's emblem burned after their duel.
Faye apologizes for using magic while the blonde boy is shocked by her humility and Louis admits his own fault.
Faye proposes a future rematch once they are both enrolled, insisting Louis won because she broke the rules. The noble mocks Faye's assumption of enrollment since Louis only possesses 4 emblems at the moment.
Faye reaches for a piece of tattered white cloth, preparing to reveal her own contribution to the exam.
Faye hands the cloth bundle to Louis, declaring it to be his well-deserved reward for defeating her.
Louis opens the cloth to find a massive stack of 10 golden emblems gathered by the red-haired girl. Faye argues this should count as a valid record while the noble shouts her name in utter frustration. Turning toward the blonde boy, Faye calls him a pretty boy and asks what he's thinking.
Faye declares she will never accept a reality where weak people pass while the deserving candidates fail.
With a sharp motion of her foot, Faye kicks her spear back into the air to resume fighting.
Faye explains the passing requirements, wondering how many emblems Lewis needs to secure his 10th place ranking. The blonde boy smiles confidently, telling Faye that he was thinking exactly the same thing about the emblems. Faye insults the blonde boy's intelligence as they both dash away to collect more emblems for Louis.
Louis watches his friends depart with a faint smile as the instructor arrives to escort him out.
The instructor formally disqualifies Louis Carril for losing his emblem while the noble watches with a smirk. As Lewis walks away with the instructor, the noble glares at his back and warns this isn't over.
The noble vows never to see the boy again, plotting a fatal accident for him during the exam. Another student encourages the noble's plan, hoping Louis isn't just another weakling like the other commoners.
A pair of massive yellow eyes looms over Louis' silhouette, questioning the boy's true and hidden identity. A blinding white light fills the scene as a transition between the forest and the academy grounds.
The instructor notes the strength of martial arts while emphasizing they can never truly match pure magic.
Louis stares at the Grand Academy spire, determined to learn how to fuse magic with his martial arts.
A full moon hangs high in the night sky, casting a cold glow over the silent forest path.
A single boot steps firmly onto the dirt road as an unknown figure prepares for a surprise ambush.
Louis wonders how to explain his torn clothes to his mother while a masked assassin stalks him.
A dark figure in a hood raises a sword, preparing to deliver a lethal blow from behind. Louis senses the presence and narrows his eyes with a cold, focused expression of immediate battle readiness. Using only his hand, the silver-haired boy catches the assassin's blade just inches from his own face.
Louis delivers a powerful kick that sends the masked assailant flying backward through the dark night air.
The assassin skids to a halt, looking up in disbelief and asking how the boy noticed his presence. Louis mocks the masked man, explaining that the pungent smell of blood made his presence very obvious. More masked attackers emerge from the trees, taunting Louis for being relaxed while facing his imminent death.
Dropping into a combat stance, Louis recognizes his opponent's skill and decides he must go all out.
Louis focuses his attention on a specific hooded figure in the distance who appears to be extremely dangerous. An attacker lunges forward with a swirling strike, warning the boy that his head will soon fly off. The masked man closes the distance instantly, swinging a heavy blade with the intent to kill the boy. A brilliant blue light glows within Louis' eye as he activates his specialized visual perception technique. Moving with supernatural speed, Louis dodges a flurry of blade strikes that leave multiple afterimages behind him.
Louis prepares a powerful counterattack, his hands surging with magical blue energy as he lunges at his foe.
Louis evades a swift strike from the masked assassin, moving with incredible agility under the moonlight.
The boy narrowly dodges a high kick as the masked man continues his relentless pursuit.
Louis gains distance from his attackers, landing firmly on the path while three figures loom ahead.
The spiky-haired leader observes that Louis' superhuman perception and combat techniques perfectly match their gathered intel.
Louis is visibly taken aback, questioning the source and nature of the information they have on him.
The leader acknowledges Louis's martial prowess but questions if he can withstand the pressure of magical weaponry.
3 magical projectiles erupt from the assassin's crossbows, streaking through the night air toward the boy.
Louis is forced into a defensive posture as the speed of the magical arrows catches him off guard.
The boy observes the destruction the wind arrows cause to the nearby trees, cursing the magical advantage.
Realizing he must elevate his physical state, Louis prepares to activate a specialized internal breathing technique.
A surging white aura surrounds Louis as he focuses his internal chi to explosively enhance his physical capabilities. With his eyes glowing a brilliant blue, Louis lunges forward with a sudden and terrifying burst of speed. An assassin dismisses the boy's efforts as a pointless struggle while launching another magical bolt at him. Louis maneuvers through the air with supernatural speed, leaving trails of energy as he closes the gap.
The archer is stunned by the boy's sudden disappearance, failing to track his movement as he strikes.
The blonde-haired leader braces himself, his expression hardening as he prepares to meet Louis's charge head-on. Louis delivers a devastating blow that sends one of the hooded assailants tumbling backward into the darkness. The silver-haired boy continues his rapid assault, weaving through the archer's lines with fluid and precise movements. Growing desperate, the spiky-haired leader shouts for his men to stop Louis's momentum at all costs. A taller, more heavily armored assassin in blue armor suddenly intervenes with a powerful downward strike. Louis clashes with the new opponent, the impact creating a violent shockwave that illuminates the forest path. The boy is momentarily paralyzed by the unexpected physical strength and weight of the armored warrior's strike.
Louis manages to slide back, his boots dragging through the dirt as he recovers from the heavy impact.
Gritting his teeth, the silver-haired boy acknowledges that this new opponent possesses an entirely different level of power.
The armored warrior stands perfectly still with his arms crossed, projecting an aura of immense confidence and experience.
Louis realizes he is now fully surrounded, with the elite warrior and the remaining archers boxing him in.
The boy uses his superior speed to create multiple afterimages, attempting to confuse his enemies and find an exit.
Multiple magical beams converge on Louis's position, the sheer volume of fire making it impossible to dodge everything.
Louis collapses onto the dirt road, his body battered and smoking after taking the full brunt of the magic. One of the archers sighs in relief, noting that the sheer effort of subduing the boy has exhausted him.
The hooded man questions if Louis is truly a commoner, noting he was far more dangerous than any apprentice.
A close-up of Louis's face reveals his blue eye glowing with renewed intensity, signaling he is far from defeated.
Louis suddenly lunges upward, grabbing the archer's weapon with a cold and terrifyingly focused expression. With a swift and brutal counterattack, Louis catches the assassin off guard and begins to reclaim the initiative.
An internal view shows the devastating force of Louis's strike as it shatters the opponent's skeletal structure.
Blood sprays through the air as Louis stands over his fallen foe, his resolve harder than ever before.
The boy doesn't hesitate, immediately pivoting his momentum to strike down the next nearby target with precision.
A brilliant flash of energy marks the point of impact as Louis neutralizes another of his would-be killers.
The armored leader watches the display, mockingly asking if Louis was merely playing dead to create an opening. Louis stands his ground, breathing heavily while clutching a broken piece of wood as his only remaining weapon.
The tall warrior claps his hands together, expressing genuine admiration for Louis's skills at such a young age. Louis questions how the man can be so indifferent to his allies' deaths, but the leader dismisses them. The silver-haired boy gathers his remaining energy for one final charge, focusing everything into a single, desperate strike. The armored man praises Louis's intelligence as he shifts into a combat stance, appearing in multiple places at once.
The warrior expresses regret that he must follow orders, as he would have otherwise spared such a talented boy.
Raising a massive dark hammer, the elite assassin declares that he would have preferred to take Louis as a disciple.
A colossal surge of purple and black energy descends toward Louis as the warrior delivers a finishing blow. The collision of their powers creates a massive explosion that completely obscures the forest path in bright light.
The armored man follows through with his overhead swing, his overwhelming power crushing everything in its immediate path.
Louis is sent flying backward through the air, blood trailing from his mouth as the force of the strike overcomes him. The armored leader knocks Louis backward as an exclamation mark signals his sudden shock. The leader notes that Louis's ability exceeds apprentices but cannot withstand a higher-ranked fighter.
The masked man declares Louis doesn't come close before slamming his weapon into the earth.
A massive vertical pillar of energy and smoke erupts from the point of impact. Lunging through the dissipating smoke, the armored leader lets out a fierce battle cry.
Dark energy shockwaves rip across the forest path from the force of the crushing blow. A thick, billowing cloud of dust completely obscures the battlefield following the leader's strike.
The masked warrior expresses disbelief that Louis managed to withstand such a devastating direct attack. Standing over the crater, the leader peers down and wonders if the boy is alive.
Gritting his teeth, Louis refuses to die while a glowing blue skeleton aura manifests.
The leader calls the situation unfortunate, informing Louis that his short life ends right here.
Raising his arm, the warrior shouts that not even a goddess can save the boy.
Louis looks up in horror as the leader activates the martial arcane celestial hammer technique.
A massive shadow of purple energy descends toward the crater to crush the silver-haired boy.
Louis thinks of his orphans and sisters, vowing to master magic and protect his family.
With his eyes turning red, Louis declares he will survive regardless of the hacks.
A colossal clash of red and purple energy illuminates the forest as the powers collide. The leader shouts in surprise as a massive explosion of light erupts from the boy.
After a massive blast, Louis lies on the road coughing amidst the smoldering forest ruins.
Observing his shattered power, the leader admits it felt like he was fighting an equal. The masked man says he finally understands why that person is targeting the silver-haired boy.
Calling the boy a monster, the leader raises his hammer again and commands him to die.
A sudden, towering vortex of green wind descends from the sky, startling the armored leader. The leader is blown back as the whirlwind creates a protective barrier around the boy.
Multiple green wind funnels erupt around the battlefield, forcing the assassin to retreat into the air.
Sweating in fear, the masked man stares at the overwhelming display of powerful wind magic.
Blasts of luminous green energy converge on the battlefield, creating a defensive perimeter around Louis.
The leader is struck by the light, screaming as he is thrown back by the force.
Louis looks toward the sky, questioning what could possibly be happening amidst the swirling wind.
A blonde man in a white cloak descends gracefully, surrounded by a radiant green aura.
Louis recognizes the newcomer as the academy principal, staring in awe at his sudden arrival.
The principal commends Louis for suppressing the rampage and offers him a potent magic healing potion. The principal watches with a stern gaze while Louis immediately drinks the glowing green liquid.
The armored assassin is sent tumbling through the air, defeated by the principal's overwhelming power.
Standing over the defeated foe, the principal questions who ordered the attack on an examinee. The principal looks down with a cold and unforgiving expression as the wounded assassin grovels. The assassin warns the Grandmaster that he cannot protect that monster as he bleeds out. Smiling maniacally, the dying man tells the principal that this is only the beginning. A violent spray of blood marks the assassin's end as the principal watches the grim scene. The principal contemplates if the assassin guild is responsible for the man's sudden forced suicide. A close-up of the principal's garment accompanies his thought that he might be overthinking things. Lewis stands up, amazed that the advanced potion has completely healed his multiple fractured bones. Turning toward the principal, Louis asks if his arrival was truly just a fortunate coincidence.
With a drop of blood on his chin, Louis asks the principal why he always saves him.
The principal looks away, stating they will discuss his reasons once they reach the boy's home. Louis clutches his head in a panic, realizing how late it has become during the fight. Shouting that the situation is terrible, Louis sprints away as the principal watches his hasty retreat. The principal orders a hidden ally named Kylie to handle the cleanup of the battlefield's remains. Night falls over Mantia in the Candria Empire as a question about repairing a millstone arises. Two men accost a nun, accusing her of tax swindling and mocking the local lord. A blue-haired man aggressively threatens a nun, claiming she needs punishment for lying to him.
Louis suddenly intervenes with a powerful kick that sends the harasser sprawling onto the ground.
The nun is stunned as Louis lands, realizing her son has finally returned home to help.
Covering her mouth in shock, the nun watches Louis check on her safety despite his injuries. Louis looks at his mother with a determined gaze while disregarding his own battered and bruised state.
The nun touches Louis's face in distress, questioning the cause of his torn and bloodied clothing.
Louis lies about his injuries while Aronian watches the exchange from a short distance behind them.
The blue-haired man points an accusing finger at Louis, claiming he is picking fights with lords. Aronian descends from the sky, interrupting the man's threats to report Louis to the local authorities. Aronian identifies himself as the principal of the academy while placing a hand on Louis's shoulder.
The two men tremble in terror, realizing Aronian is a Grand Master who demands they leave.
The harassers bow submissively and apologize, promising the Grand Master they will obey his strict orders. Aronian addresses the nun as Louis's mother and requests a private conversation regarding an important matter. The nun welcomes Aronian into her home, politely offering the esteemed academy principal a place to sit. The group walks across the wooden floor as they transition into the main living area of the house.
Aronian is surprised by a millstone that operates automatically without the use of any visible magic.
Looking around the room, Aronian notes that many strange and efficient gadgets are present everywhere he looks.
The high ceiling of the modest home reflects the intricate craftsmanship of Louis's many clever inventions. The nun credits Louis for all the inventions, explaining how they have simplified their daily lives significantly. Aronian praises Louis's exceptional talent, while the nun expresses concern about the boy's behavior during exams.
Aronian reflects on the Gaia scripture, noting that Louis' potential reminds him of a legendary ancient figure.
A narration describes an ancient era when humanity suffered under the cruel and tyrannical rule of monsters.
A lone human genius is depicted approaching a massive, seated monster to challenge its absolute authority. The text explains how the goddess guided the genius to create the powerful martial arcane combat arts. The first hero successfully defeats the monstrous threat, effectively saving the human race from total extinction. Celebrations erupt as soldiers cheer over a fallen beast, marking the historical birth of the saint calendar. A text box indicates that the Gaia scripture contains a specific name for this legendary human savior. The genius is officially identified as the first hero, shown standing victoriously over a defeated, massive foe. A voice echoes the belief that this mysterious figure was the one true savior of the world. The nun questions why common folk legends don't mention a specific hero saving humanity from the monsters.
Aronian explains that the true hero's identity is far different from the myths known by the public.
Louis and the nun are shocked as Aronian reveals the hero had black hair and black eyes. Aronian emphasizes that the details regarding the hero's true appearance are a strictly guarded state secret. He clarifies that only high-ranking members of human society are allowed to know this classified historical truth. Aronian describes how a terrifying madness consumed the hero's heart, leading him to desire total slaughter. An image of a blood-soaked battlefield illustrates the horrific consequences of the hero's sudden descent into madness. Fallen allies and enemies alike lie dead, victims of the hero's uncontrollable and violent rage-filled rampaging spree. Due to his bloodlust, the hero's existence was systematically erased from all official records of human history. Aronian mentions the term inner madness, connecting the ancient curse to the events of the current day. A close-up of a demonic red eye represents the cursed essence that once plagued the first hero. Louis stares at his hand in contemplation, wondering if his own power is linked to this madness.
Aronian explains that nations search for black-haired individuals because they fear a recurrence of the ancient curse. Patting the boy's head, Aronian reveals he knows Louis used hair dye to hide his true identity.
The nun tearfully confesses she ordered the hair dye to protect Louis from potential danger or persecution. Louis reassures his mother, noting that Aronian's peaceful arrival implies he is here for a specific reason.
Aronian calls Louis a potential new hero for his rare ability to successfully tame the inner madness. Aronian uses magic to levitate an apple while warning that the world's peace is merely an illusion.
Holding the apple, Aronian explains that a great darkness is constantly lurking just beneath the world's surface. Aronian observes the apple against the backdrop of a full moon, reflecting on the absurdity of legends.
Aronian expresses his firm desire to guide Louis toward a future that ensures the survival of humanity.
Aronian watches the evening sky with a quiet, pensive expression as the wind blows gently.
Louis gazes at a red apple with a bruised face and a weary, troubled expression.
Narrator states that most students failed the exam due to Faye and Kane's intense efforts.
Aronian levitates above the group and informs Louis that he has officially passed the test.
The blonde principal extends his hand, offering to give Louis his personal instruction and guidance.
Louis holds the apple, wondering what would happen if he eventually lost control and went berserk.
A sharp glint of light flashes within the principal's purple eye as he observes the boy. Shocked by the sudden movement, Louis watches as the apple in his hand is instantly carved. Standing under the full moon, Aronian warns that he will take the boy's life when necessary.
A local boy is amazed that Louis received a personal invitation from the esteemed Principal Aronian.
The boy excitedly lists the daunting tuition, uniform costs, and dormitory fees required for the academy. Louis contemplates his mysterious connection to the legendary hero while looking at a dark, shadowed figure.
Aronian reveals he knew about the hair dye while patting Louis' head in a fatherly manner.
A floating speech bubble provides an ominous warning about an inevitable event occurring in the future.
Louis wonders if he should trust Aronian's words while the principal's grim promise of death lingers.
Louis questions why Aronian shared dangerous secrets while the principal argues his mother needs the truth. Louis firmly declares that his mother is not a burden, his face filled with visible anger. Aronian flies away, warning Louis that his family is in danger and he must become stronger.
Louis stares at the distant school buildings, admitting the principal is right about the coming trials.
Lana and the other children run toward Louis with pure joy as he returns home safely. Louis scoops Lana up into a hug, calling out her name happily as they are reunited. Lana tearfully asks Louis to visit home often, expressing how much she hates saying goodbye. Louis smiles warmly and reassures Lana that he will return during every long school break.
Lana mentions that mother says only bad kids break promises, and Louis vows to keep his.
The two friends share a heartfelt pinky promise to ensure Louis returns to the orphanage safely.
A boy runs up to announce that a noble's butler is currently calling for Louis nearby.
A horse-drawn carriage waits as a butler in a top hat approaches to verify Louis' identity. The butler delivers an invitation from Kane, who wishes to deepen their friendship before school starts.
Louis accepts the formal invitation and follows the butler toward the waiting horse-drawn carriage.
The prosperous town of Harzan is shown, a bustling location built around the powerful Aranka family. Narrative text explains that even the town's prosperity is directly tied to the distinguished Aranka family.
Louis is awestruck by the massive mansion while Kane runs across the courtyard to greet him.
Kane excitedly embraces Louis, celebrating the fact that they will officially be classmates at the academy.
Kane acknowledges that he only passed the difficult exam because of Louis's great help.
Kane brings Louis inside the manor, challenging him to frequent training matches before the semester begins. Kane assumes Louis is eager to learn about the Magic Academy and advanced techniques from him. A noblewoman in a purple dress appears on the stairs, demanding to know the visitor's identity.
Kane introduces Louis as his friend while trying to explain his sudden presence at the estate.
The woman's face is cold and judgmental as she glares down at the young commoner boy. Kane trembles in fear, visibly sweating under the intense pressure of his mother's harsh, judgmental gaze.
The mother scolds Kane for his poor choice in friends, claiming commoners like Louis are unworthy associates who distract from his goal of becoming a sage.
Looking down with deep contempt, the noblewoman questions Louis' intentions and asks if he approached her son seeking money or influence.
The noblewoman removes a gold ring worth dozens of coins and offers it to Louis as a bribe to end his friendship with her son.
A close-up of the noblewoman's face reveals her deepening anger and intense aristocratic class prejudice. Kane shouts in protest against his mother's disrespectful and cruel treatment of his new friend. Kane looks at Louis with a sweating face and sincerely apologizes for his mother's offensive behavior. Louis picks up the gold ring and questions the mother's shallow values, asking if she truly believes her son's friendship is worth only a single coin. The noblewoman calls for someone as Kane watches Louis stand his ground with determined eyes. A close-up of the woman's arm shows her preparing to give a signal for her bonds. As tension peaks, the noblewoman calls out for assistance and commands her guards to forcibly remove the commoner from the estate. Kane defends his friend's exam records while the noblewoman expresses disbelief that a commoner could surpass elite families. Louis steps forward, claiming his presence will help Kane reach even greater heights of strength and skill.
The noblewoman screams in rage, feeling Louis is mocking the prestigious name of the Aranka family. Tension explodes in the hallway as Louis and Kane prepare to face the mansion's overwhelming physical pressure. A tall man wearing a red cape enters the room, his presence immediately silencing the heated argument.
Grandmaster William Aranka acknowledges that Kane will grow stronger under the influence of his talented peer.
Louis, Kane, and the noblewoman are frozen in shock by the master's unexpected validation of the commoner.
William looms over the group, his massive and imposing frame dominating the entire grand entrance of the manor. A heavy footstep echoes across the carpeted floor as the master of the house approaches the children.
The noblewoman trembles and sweats as she calls out to her husband with a nervous, forced smile.
She frantically argues that associating with Louis will prevent Kane from ever surpassing the Grandmaster's legendary legacy.
William ignores his wife while Kane respectfully bows to greet his father, who remains stoic and distant.
Louis introduces himself formally, noting that the master possesses an aura rivaling the strength of the principal.
William gazes down silently at the boy, his shadowed face hiding his true thoughts and immediate intentions.
Kane confirms Louis's superiority as the Grand Master looms closer, testing his son's honesty and resolve.
William commands Louis to prove his worth while unleashing a terrifying red tiger aura of lethal intent.
Louis stands paralyzed as he feels the crushing weight of the Grand Master's intense and murderous willpower. The spectral red tiger lunges at the boy, manifesting the Master's raw power into a physical threat. Louis realizes the man is truly testing him with a level of bloodlust meant for an enemy.
A close-up of a glowing eye reveals William's overwhelming desire to crush the boy's spirit.
A blinding flash of white light erupts as Louis prepares to resist the Master's soul-tearing mental assault.
Louis manages to stay standing, demonstrating a level of mental fortitude that shocks the observing master.
Acknowledging William's Grandmaster status, Louis begins to tap into his own hidden and fiery inner potential. Louis explains that his years of hunting monsters have made him resistant to such primitive killing intent. A massive vortex of golden fire erupts around Louis as he unleashes his true power in response.
The golden explosion of energy expands, forcing the spectators back as Louis's aura rivals the Grandmaster's.
William looks on with a stunned expression, completely surprised by the commoner's sudden display of overwhelming power.
A giant red dragon aura manifests behind Louis, roaring in a direct challenge to the master's tiger.
Louis's eyes glow with draconic intensity as his fiery red aura clashes violently with William's red tiger. The two legendary animal spirits collide, filling the training area with a massive and earth-shaking discharge of energy.
Kane shouts Louis's name in terror as the shockwave from the clash threatens to destroy the surroundings.
A thick cloud of dust and debris rises as the explosive energy from the two auras dissipates.
Louis drops to his hands and knees, gasping for air after the immense strain of the trial.
Kane rushes to support his exhausted friend, checking to see if he survived the master's brutal test.
William gazes down at the boy with newfound respect, asking the core reason behind his pursuit of power.
Louis stares up with a sharp and unwavering gaze, ready to declare his ultimate motivation for strength.
Louis firmly states that he seeks power for the sole purpose of protecting his cherished family.
William remains silent, seemingly impressed by the boy's honest and grounded conviction during the intense confrontation. William commands Kane to learn from Louis, noting that his son's current willpower is significantly lacking. The noblewoman is visibly horrified as she questions why her husband is accepting a commoner so easily. William turns a cold gaze toward his wife, asking if she dares to challenge his final decision. Terrified by her husband's icy tone, the noblewoman immediately retreats and denies having any conflicting opinions. Kane watches his mother tremble in fear, realizing just how much power his father truly holds over everyone. Kane quickly regains his composure and invites Louis to the training grounds to begin their practice sessions.
Arriving at the expansive Aranka training ground, Kane offers a sincere apology for his parents' extreme behavior.
Louis dismisses the apology, noting that the difference in their abilities is not as large as feared. Kane looks away sadly, admitting that Louis is much better suited to be his father's son. Louis smiles kindly, suggesting that the Grandmaster's harshness is merely a unique way of expressing love.
The sun shines brightly through the clouds as the heavy atmosphere of the mansion finally begins to clear.
Kane looks toward the sky with a thoughtful expression, pondering Louis's insightful perspective on his father's nature.
Close-up of Kane's eye, he ponders Louis's words about his father's love.
Motion lines sweep across the frame, indicating a transition in the narrative flow.
Kane recalls his childhood spent entirely within the manor, focused solely on rigorous training.
Young Kane fought monsters without understanding why he was forced to swing his sword. Kane explains that he only ever wanted his distant father to acknowledge his efforts.
Kane admits his status and talent felt like chains, making his home feel like a prison.
Kane explains that the tighter his constraints became, the more he yearned for outside freedom.
Kane notes that he dreamed of flying across the continent and singing like a bard.
Louis says, "This is a world where only strength matters. Right now, I'm far too weak. It's not that I want to be strong, but swinging my sword."
Louis continues, "is the only way to break these chains." A sharp visual effect represents the decisive power behind Louis' declaration for total freedom.
Kane says, "Father is also an academy graduate, so I'll enter the academy and get stronger too. I want permission."
Kane shouts his desire for the permission to live his life freely and without restraint.
Kane says, "So anyway," as he readies his training weapon for the upcoming sparring match.
Louis says, "I'm counting on you," as both boys share a look of mutual respect.
Louis gets into a combat stance and expresses his readiness to begin their practice session.
William Aranka stands at the edge of the training grounds, silently observing the two boys. William Aranka asks his butler for the results of the investigation regarding Louis's background.
Butler says he's definitely not ordinary. According to intelligence, during the exam, he used mysterious combat techniques no one had ever seen. Not only did he break past records, but he even defeated Faye, who used magic.
The butler adjusts his monocle while continuing to report on the young boy's remarkable achievements.
Butler says, moreover, he's held in high regard by Grandmaster Aronian, who apparently even fought the Assassin Guild last night to protect him.
William Aranka watches the spar and concludes that the boy seems to be a troublemaker.
The butler asks why William permitted Kane to associate with such a potentially dangerous person.
William says troublemakers attract danger, and when you challenge and overcome it, people grow. He might truly be able to make Kane stronger.
Kane shouts, "Take my technique!" as he unleashes a swirling green vortex of wind magic.
Louis grins and tells Kane to come at him using his full magical power.
Kane lunges forward, announcing his martial arcane wind technique, while William watches with arms crossed.
Louis's eye glows with intensity as he prepares to counter Kane's incoming magical sword strike.
Louis executes a swift defensive maneuver, successfully parrying Kane's high-speed wind-enhanced lunge.
Louis says accelerating with magic is good, but your movements are a bit too linear. Even though I used magic, he easily countered me.
Kane says, "Now I understand why even Faye couldn't beat you." Louis asks, Is there something on my face?
Louis stops the spar and asks Kane if he has ever felt something was wrong.
Kane says, But my techniques are secret arts passed down through the Aranka family. Father and grandfather both mastered these and became strong, you know? What I'm saying is..."
Louis says, "There's another path." Kane asks, "Different from father and grandfather? Another path?"
Louis stands before the weapon rack, contemplating the next step in Kane's specialized combat training.
Louis pulls out two short blades and asks if Kane wants to surprise his father. William Aranka notices the boys huddling together and whispering, piquing his curiosity about their plans.
William Aranka expresses his confusion while continuing to watch the boys from across the grounds. The two boys jump through the air together, beginning a new and unconventional training exercise. William Aranka watches from behind as the duo continues to push themselves on the field.
A narrative transition screen marks the progression of time during their intense daily practice sessions.
Louis says, in martial arts, speed is an absolute weapon. Louis explains that true speed is more than just how fast a person can physically move. Louis explains, but also includes reaction time and quick decision-making as he illustrates a battle scenario.
Louis says your natural speed pairs well with wind attribute support magic. Louis mentions that thrusting techniques are notoriously difficult for most warriors to master completely.
Louis says just because your grandfather mastered it doesn't mean you can. The reason your father stopped at Grandmaster might be because of that. But to maximize your talent, you need to change to a specialized combat style.
Louis asks, "Are you prepared for that?" Kane replies, "Don't let me in with other pampered nobles. I'll do anything to become free."
Louis says, "Well said. The key to fighting is to keep moving and retreat when you should."
Both boys share a confident and determined smile as they commit to their new partnership.
William Aranka acknowledges that the two boys possess both exceptional ability and deep determination.
Louis and Kane lunge forward, executing a perfectly synchronized dual dagger strike against their opponent.
Kane announces he is using wind magic to accelerate his speed during the intense spar. A massive vortex of green wind magic sweeps across the battlefield, targeting the Grandmaster.
William pushes his butler aside to shield him from the impact of the incoming attack. Kane strikes from the air, channeling his wind magic into a high-speed downward dagger thrust. Louis supports the attack from the ground, pressing the master with a flurry of slashes. Louis explains that daggers are the fastest weapons while pressuring the master with rapid strikes.
Louis details the butterfly step technique, using speed to exceed an opponent's reaction time and space.
William Aranka voices his surprise as he observes the boy's unexpected level of martial skill.
Louis circles the master at high speed, manifesting blue butterfly illusions with his rhythmic footwork. The training ground is filled with ethereal butterflies as Louis skillfully maneuvers around his opponent.
Kane uses his aerial wind magic to dive toward his father with increased tactical precision. Kane experiences a profound sense of lightness, envisioning himself soaring through the sky with wings.
A thought bubble reveals Kane's inner joy as he declares that he feels like a bird. Overwhelmed by the sensation of freedom, Kane declares that he loves the feeling of flight. Kane notes that the fusion of daggers, combat techniques, and wind magic is surely effective.
William reacts with a sudden, sharp movement as the pressure from the boys' assault increases. A close-up of William's eye reveals his shock as he questions the nature of the attack. Kane declares that this combination of speed and magic represents his own unique martial way.
William Aranka scoffs at his son's declaration, unimpressed by the boy's attempt at independence.
A violent red shockwave blasts both boys backward as William unleashes a surge of power.
William asks if they think abandoning clan techniques to prove their own will is sufficient.
A dark text bubble dismisses their efforts as naive, signifying the Master's cold and oppressive disappointment.
Louis and Cain immediately recover their footing and launch a joint pincer attack at William.
Louis commands Cain to accelerate, and the blonde-haired boy confirms his readiness to strike.
Cain uses his wind magic to propel himself forward with a sudden burst of extreme speed. From William's perspective, two glowing streaks of energy converge on his position from both sides.
The Grand Master watches with silent focus as his young opponents close in on him. The two boys unleash a frantic flurry of strikes, surrounding the Master with multiple afterimages.
William's eye glows red as he asks if that relatively slow flurry is all they have.
William easily catches a dagger with sheer force.
Cain is forced to jump back to avoid a powerful counterstrike from the Grandmaster. William charges forward while calling his son a coward for attempting to retreat from the fight.
Cain recalls Lewis's advice that retreating is not weakness but a way to bridge attacks.
Cain realizes that a well-timed foot stomp serves as a bridge to his next attack.
Cain activates a wind magic tornado, using the swirling energy to propel himself into another strike. Lewis and Cain charge forward together, their determination reflected in their fierce and focused expressions.
William looks on with a startled expression, surprised by the intensity of the boys' synergy.
Both boys shout with effort as they launch a final coordinated strike at the Grandmaster.
Louis mentions a baseball technique called a changeup, causing Cain to ask for further clarification.
Lewis tells his opponent to take the hit while readying a strike with intense focus.
A sharp zoom captures a dagger blade passing dangerously close to the blonde-haired boy's throat.
The training ground rings with the sound of metal as the boys clash their weapons.
The combatants take a brief moment to reset their stances during their intense practice session.
Louis explains that a changeup uses speed variations to deceive opponents and create openings.
Louis explains that maximizing the dagger's strengths with speed allows a warrior to overwhelm an opponent.
William displays incredible agility, dodging a series of high-speed attacks while leaving subtle afterimages behind. Cain charges forward with glowing green magic, focusing his power for a decisive and rapid maneuver.
William mocks the slow attack as he is struck, unaware that Cain has already bypassed him.
Cain strikes from above with his dagger while William Aranka watches with a stunned expression.
Both Lewis and Cain let out a determined shout as they prepare their final combined effort. The two boys launch a coordinated pincer attack against the Master at the center of the field. William Aranka brings the match to a sudden halt by loudly declaring that they have done enough.
Both boys freeze in place as William turns his attention toward his son and calls his name.
Cain stares back at his father with an intense, sweat-beaded expression following the exhausting training session.
William Aranka says, "Don't disgrace the Aranka family name," as he turns his back and walks away.
Cain says, "Yes, father," as he responds with a joyous smile and enthusiastically acknowledges the order. A close-up shows Cain clutching his uniform near his heart, overwhelmed with emotion after the spar.
Butler asks, "Master?" while following William as Louis and Cain celebrate their success in the background. William reflects on the boys' tactical use of consecutive dagger strikes and hit-and-away speed feints.
William reflects on the new possibility of retreating and finds the tactical development to be very interesting.
William thinks, "To think I'd learn from children." Louis notes the spar with the Grand Master is over.
The Master and Butler disappear into the distance as the training session officially concludes for the day.
Cain says, "Father recognized me for the first time. This is the best I felt in my entire life. Let's go. I want to give you a present."
A narrative bubble declares, "As expected of a great family," as the scene shifts to a library.
Louis exclaims, "So many books," while Cain carries a large, heavy cardboard box toward his friend. Cain says, "This is my thanks to you. Without you, I couldn't have found my path so quickly."
Louis stares at the box with wide-eyed surprise, caught off guard by the boy's generous gesture.
Louis looks into the box and wonders how it could contain something so incredibly valuable.
Cain says, not just books about Candria Arcanist Academy, but also books about magic that commoners rarely see. Reading them will definitely help you.
Narrative text details the Academy's diverse curriculum and the mandatory Magic Awakening ritual for all new students.
Louis asks, "Magic Awakening ritual?" Cain explains it involves sensing elements through the statue of Gaia and costs 10 gold coins.
Louis thinks, that's several years' worth. 100 gold coins? The orphanage's living expenses. Do I have to pay at the Academy?
Cain says, "Don't worry, it's free if you do it at the Academy. That's one reason everyone wants to enter the Arcanist Academy."
A dialogue bubble mentions that various living expenses and book rental fees still cost a fair amount.
Cain says, "You can also pay with credits, though. Anyway, please accept this without hesitation. Rely on me whenever you're in trouble."
Cain says, "Oh yeah, about that promise we made. Can we call it even with this?" Louis says, "Sure." He thinks, "Looks like I need to earn money. Julian said magic pharmacists can earn well. I wonder if there are related books in here."
Louis says, "That's it." He thinks, if I invent things using knowledge from my previous life, I could make money quickly, right?
Louis asks, "Hey Cain, does the Aranka family have connections with merchant guilds?
Kane asks why, but Lewis keeps it a secret.
A transition screen marks the passage of 1 week until the Candria Arcanist Academy entrance ceremony. Uniformed students begin to enter the grand halls of the academy as the school year starts.
Louis says the day is finally here as he walks through the academy gates in his uniform.
Louis says, this smell, as a girl with long pink hair walks past him in the crowd.
Louis thinks, is that the trendy new cologne? Judging by the price, his parents must be at least counts.
The pink-haired student stops and glances back at Louis as they walk through the school courtyard.
Rose says, hey there, I'm Rose, 150th class. Congrats on getting in, newbie. Want me to show you around the academy?
Louis says that would really help. I'm Louis Carril, as he introduces himself to the older student.
Rose thinks, Carol? Never heard of it. Are you maybe some noble's illegitimate kid?
Rose says you might already know this, but for the past 2 years, since the emperor's gotten old,
Narrative text details how imperial heirs have been fighting with nobles and great families at the academy.
Rose explains that Principal Aronian maintains a peaceful surface while a fierce struggle for resources happens behind scenes.
Rose warns, regular students can move up just fine if they pass classes and earn credits, but if you get targeted or fail to earn credits, you can get expelled.
A slender hand reaches out to playfully tilt the chin of the young boy upward.
Rose says, anyway, you're one of the ones people are watching, so do your best, okay? By the way, your family.
Rose leans in close to the boy's face, making him look nervous as she continues her questioning.
A new student says, you must be the commoner freshman who broke the entrance exam record, Louis Carril, right?
Brian says, nice to meet you, I'm Brian, as he introduces himself while a bubble screams, a commoner.
Rose reacts with shock, thinking, but I definitely smelled after learning the boy is a commoner.
Rose storms away in a rage, complaining that the entire encounter was a waste.
Louis greets Brian politely, moving on from Rose's abrupt and angry departure.
Brian tells Louis not to mind the girl as she walks further away.
Brian explains that the academy mirrors the empire, warning that commoners face many difficulties. Kane waves and runs toward his friends as they stand in the academy courtyard. Brian leaves to greet other freshmen, offering his help whenever Louis might need it.
Louis stands alone for a moment, silently watching the other students depart.
Brian walks off as Kane and his 2 companions approach Louis from the distance.
Kane asks about the discussion with Brian, which Louis dismisses as simple greetings.
Kane reveals that Brian is the Chancellor's son, clarifying their lack of closeness. Kane admits Brian is a decent person while Louis listens with a calm expression.
Kane insults Brian's resolve as Miliana and Faye arrive to join the group's conversation.
Kane challenges others to match Louis's strength if they want to earn his genuine acknowledgement. Miliana vows to win their next encounter while flashing a competitive smile at Louis.
Miliana and Kane trade childish insults as they bicker loudly in the middle of the courtyard.
Faye drags Miliana away to complete their registration while Kane shouts a final morning.
Kane hands Louis a heavy pouch of gold coins as his share of their profits.
Louis reveals they made money selling a new perfume he invented through the trading company.
Louis explains that his perfume's subtle scent sets it apart from all traditional fragrances.
Kane is impressed by the profit and decides to give some to his mother.
Louis asks Kane to keep their business secret as they walk toward the reception desk. A bespectacled official gives Louis his credit card while encouraging him to master his skills.
Nearby students whisper rumors about Louis being a commoner who relied on noble connections. Kane explains that Sheath was expelled for hiring assassins to attack Louis during the exam.
Kane warns that Sheath's brother Jess is dangerous and advises Louis to stay close.
Jess glares at Louis and Kane with a menacing expression as they pass each other. Jess's companion tries to talk him out of it, but Jess insists the fun begins.
A foreboding text bubble declares that Louis will be forced to savor despair slowly.
The Academy Assembly Hall is packed as the headmaster welcomes the new student body.
The principal encourages the students to be proud of overcoming hardships to enter the academy. The speaker urges students to study hard and become strong pillars of the empire. The principal introduces the freshman representative, Neil Gunn, and calls him to the stage.
A pair of bare feet steps up the stone stairs leading to the assembly stage. A muscular, shirtless boy with red hair walks onto the stage carrying a massive axe.
The student body reacts with shock and confusion at the freshman representative's wild appearance.
A staff member fumes with rage while students wonder if he is the principal.
A loud shout commands the attention of the assembly, addressing the students as morons.
Neil Gunn stands defiantly on stage, brandishing his giant axe before the stunned audience.
Neil Gunn vows to beat every student present until they are terrified of him.
The angry crowd shouts back at Neil, calling him a savage brute and a musclehead.
Neil Gunn screams back at the students, calling them weaklings who only talk big. The academy faculty are in despair over having to teach such a problematic student.
Neil Gunn points his axe and declares that his primary target is Louis Carril.
Neil Gunn hurls his massive axe through the air, forcing several students to scramble away.
The giant axe slams into the stone floor with a violent and destructive impact.
The weapon remains embedded in the ground, surrounded by smoke and shattered stone.
Louis and Kane stare at the massive axe that has landed directly in front of them.
A close-up of Louis reveals his intense and steady focus as he faces the challenge.
Neil Gunn places a foot on his weapon and glares intensely at his chosen opponent. Neil Gunn declares an immediate fight as he and Lewis exchange fierce, determined glares. Neil Gunn challenges Louis with an intense stare while declaring that the two of them are destined for a fated confrontation. Neil Gunn stands defiantly atop the handle of his massive axe, looming over Louis as they face each other in the assembly hall.
Kane intervenes by shouting that the ceremony is still ongoing and demands Neil get away from Lewis. Neil Gunn mocks him, asking if he is scared and dismissing him as a loudmouth.
Kane seethes with visible rage as Neil Gunn continues to provoke him by asking if he is all bark and no bite.
A narrative bubble captures Neil's frustration that everyone is the same. Louis watches as Kane loses his temper and prepares a punch.
A swift hand catches the boy's wrist, successfully halting the punch before it can strike its target.
Louis maintains a firm grip on Kane's arm, calmly preventing his friend from starting a fight that could lead to trouble.
Neil Gunn offers a mocking thumbs up, stating he does not mind taking them both on and labeling them as cowards.
Brian approaches and identifies Neil, remarking that he and Louis are among the few talented commoners present and suggesting they should get along.
Brian warns that acting selfishly will ensure they do not last long at the academy as they stand in the middle of the hall.
Neil Gunn glares with annoyance and tells the noble to get lost, stating he has no interest in dealing with small fry.
Brian fumes while nearby students whisper about commoners lacking manners and questioning how such people were even allowed to enroll.
Brian watches Neil depart with a dark expression as Kane cracks his knuckles, noting that some people only learn through the hard way.
Neil Gunn declares he will smash his opponent first, but a bespectacled teacher suddenly appears and reminds him that student fights are prohibited. The teacher explains matches are only for classes or official events with faculty present, warning that any rule breaker will be expelled immediately.
Neil Gunn laughs off the warning, admitting that getting expelled would be a significant problem for his future plans.
Neil Gunn rests his massive weapon over his shoulder and walks away, noting that their fight will have to be put on hold. Neil Gunn looks back with a fierce determination, thinking that Louis Kirill should wait for their inevitable rematch. Louis remains composed and focused, silently acknowledging the challenge from his newly declared rival.
The academy official concludes the ceremony, informing the students they are free for the day but must attend classes starting tomorrow.
Louis wonders why Neil suddenly picked a fight while Kane blames the situation on a certain muscle-brained girl's previous actions.
Miliana hits Kane on the head, calling him an idiot and warning that they almost got expelled. She reveals she fought Neil during the final exam.
A simple message announces that the entrance exam has officially come to an end. Narrative text explains that due to the time limit, the match between the two students ended in a draw.
Miliana explains that Neil heard rumors she lost to Louis and has been dying to fight him since. Louis says he wouldn't blame her.
Kane suggests they get going as the trio walks through the academy corridors following the intense afternoon events.
The group walks past many glaring students as a thought bubble notes that they are already quite hated by their peers. The scene shifts to the academy's commercial district featuring grand buildings and various shops for student supplies.
A dialogue bubble expresses extreme frustration at the shockingly high prices of goods within the academy's marketplace.
Louis visits an apothecary and appears shocked by the prices, while the spectacled shopkeeper greets him with a cheerful smile.
The shopkeeper presents a fluffy feather pillow, claiming it is a real bargain at the price of 30 silver coins.
The shopkeeper offers a magic herbal pillow for 5 gold coins, causing Louis to facepalm in disbelief at the extreme cost.
Kane whispers that these prices are actually on the cheap side and emphasizes the importance of earning credits and money.
Louis decides to purchase the cheapest new life starter set for 100 silver coins as the shopkeeper happily agrees. Louis reflects on his previous perfume profits and decides to send the remaining money back to the orphanage for their expenses.
Louis observes various magic potions on the shelves, acknowledging their necessity for training while resolving to find more ways to earn money.
Miliana and Faye head toward the dormitories, reminding Louis that his magic awakening ritual is scheduled for the following day. Louis is motivated by a vision of gold coins, vowing to work hard and earn as much as possible at the academy. The afternoon light hits the impressive facade of the academy's grand white stone dormitory building. Louis walks through the dormitory hall with his new pillow, hoping his roommate is not a thug or a schemer. Louis arrives at his room and looks surprised to see pillows and bundles of fabric flying through the open doorway. A voice from inside the room shouts for someone not to screw with them as Louis cautiously enters the doorway.
A group of bullies corners a small student, threatening that it is in his best interest to follow their commands.
The purple-haired boy remains silent while the group of upperclassmen looms over him in the narrow dormitory corridor. One of the bullies scowls with malice, clearly displeased with the younger boy's lack of response.
The bully grabs the purple-haired boy's tie and asks if he is trying to pick a fight with them.
Louis reaches out and touches the bully's shoulder with a glowing finger, initiating a sudden magical intervention. The bully recoils in agony as a sudden surge of electrical energy courses through his entire arm.
Louis calmly reminds the group that duels are forbidden and asks if they are truly prepared to be expelled. The bullies recoil in shock and protest that they had not even done anything yet, attempting to deny their harassment.
A bully claims self-defense while accusing Louis of being the one to throw the first punch.
Lewis effortlessly dodges a physical attack while keeping a firm grip on his newly purchased pillow. The senior student accidentally strikes his own companion in the face with a powerful and clumsy blow. Confusion erupts among the group of upperclassmen as one of their members is knocked to the floor. Louis maintains a calm and mocking demeanor while asking when he supposedly struck any of them. The injured bully cries in pain while his friend admits to being completely confused by the situation. Louis discreetly activates a surge of electrical magic to manipulate the lead bully's physical movements. The lead bully lets out a pained cry as his body involuntarily kicks his other companion.
The trio of seniors falls into a disorganized heap on the floor while groaning in visible distress.
Louis continues using subtle magical shocks to force the lead bully to strike his own allies. The terrified student looks on in shock as visible electrical energy courses through his uncontrollable limbs.
A close-up shows a foot stomping down violently as Louis maintains his secret control over the bully.
The seniors groan in agony after being forced to injure each other through Louis' clever magical manipulation. The lead bully attempts to explain himself while his bleeding friend demands to know what he is doing. The senior points a trembling finger at Louis while desperately claiming that the situation is entirely his fault. Louis suggests the upperclassmen should stop blaming others just because their own bodies are behaving strangely. The bully realizes he was being physically controlled and labels Louis a monster in a fit of rage. Louis reacts with a cold and intense glare after being called a monster by his fleeing opponent. The bullies scramble away in total terror, wondering what else Louis might do to harm them. The purple-haired boy reaches out to grab Louis's arm as the group of seniors finally retreats. The boy suggests that they should simply leave the matter as it is while Louis watches silently.
Louis warns that official trouble awaits them all if they continue brawling and offers to see the principal.
The bullies flee the dormitory while shouting threats that Louis will eventually pay for his actions. Louis identifies himself as the new roommate and asks the purple-haired boy to provide his name. The boy offers a silent bow before walking away without giving Louis a verbal response. Louis spots a name tag on the boy's worn pillow identifying him as Kara Candace. Louis acknowledges the name Kara while noting the boy's strange behavior as he moves deeper into the room. Louis stands alone in the disheveled room, reflecting on the odd introduction to his new living space. Louis suspects his roommate is beyond shy and is likely a frequent target for school bullies. Louis tidies up the room while expressing a hope that the upcoming awakening ritual proceeds smoothly. A series of abstract vertical bars signals a transition as the story moves to the following day.
Two dark figures prepare a magical circle on the floor of a large and dimly lit hall.
Shadowy silhouettes stand over the ritual site as the academy prepares for the important ceremony. The student body assembles in a massive, ornate cathedral-style hall facing a giant white statue. Louis and Kara stand among the crowd as Louis remarks on the impressive scale of the cathedral. A priest commands the students to behold Goddess Gaia, the great creator and guardian of their world. Narrative artwork depicts Goddess Gaia as she appeared during the ancient beginnings of the world. The history of the world is explained, detailing how powerful dragons once ruled over the ancient skies. A massive, muscular behemoth roars, representing the era when giant monsters dominated the prehistoric landscape. The history lesson continues, noting that behemoths ruled the land while massive krakens controlled the deep seas. The narrative describes a brutal and bloody power struggle that once occurred between these mighty ancient monsters. Countless humans reportedly perished as the world fell into total chaos during the era of monster rule. Monsters are depicted sitting atop thrones made of human remains, illustrating the historical suffering of humanity. Goddess Gaia became filled with intense anger over the destruction and suffering caused by the monstrous creatures. Gaia bestowed elemental magic and blessings upon humanity so they could understand the world's natural forces. Humans utilized martial arcane to fight back against the monsters and successfully escaped their predicted annihilation. A final historical panel declares that humans eventually emerged as the new rulers of the entire world.
The priest encourages the current students to receive Gaia's blessing and awaken their own true magical nature. Louis notes with frustration that there is still no mention of the first hero in official history.
Kara looks toward Louis with a curious expression as the Grand Awakening ceremony finally begins.
The priest stops Louis and Kara Candace, signaling for them to wait for his specific instructions.
The priest directs the two boys to a specific side and commands them to follow him. The priest points toward floor tiles, explaining that those with magical talent will sense the elements. The priest looks downward with a malicious glare while insulting those who fail to sense anything. Louis remains silent and focused, maintaining a stoic expression despite the instructor's clear hostility. The priest stares down Louis with open hostility, asserting that the academy has no use for him. The priest announces the start of the ritual and orders the remaining students to take their seats. Louis watches the priest walk away, questioning if the man harbors a personal grudge against him. The narrator explains that earth, fire, wind, and water form the foundation of their magical world. The priest instructs the seated students to sharpen their minds and reach out to the elemental forces. Light manifests around the priest as he prays to the goddess who dwells above them all. Orbs of light swirl throughout the grand hall as the collective magical energy begins to manifest. Specific elemental symbols for fire and water glow on the floor tiles beneath the meditating students.
a concentrated beam of golden light descends from the ceiling toward the center of the hall.
The goddess statue's eyes glow with a piercing light as the awakening ritual reaches its climax.
Divine radiance fills the entire cathedral, signaling the full activation of the goddess Gaia's ancient blessing.
Students are physically blown back by the sudden and overwhelming surge of raw elemental power.
A massive, glowing, spectral image of goddess Gaia looms behind the white stone statue.
Two students look up in awe as they witness the beautiful manifestation of the elements. Students react with a mix of excitement and disappointment as specific elements begin to choose them.
Neil experiences a violent and explosive fire awakening that dwarfs the efforts of his nearby peers.
Onlookers are shocked to realize that the commoner Neil has awakened both earth and fire attributes. Nearby students watch in disbelief, questioning if Neil is actually a genius for controlling magic so easily.
Neil laughs maniacally with glowing red eyes, celebrating his successful awakening as flames swirl around him.
Neil stands amidst his own fire and stone, declaring that all elements will obey his command.
Neil glances back at Lewis and Kara, who are both still sitting in total silence. Neil taunts Louis, claiming that someone who cannot even awaken could never be a worthy rival.
Students note the total lack of elements around Lewis, wondering if he is failing the ritual.
Louis struggles within a dark mental void, questioning if his otherworldly origins are blocking his senses.
Louis recalls his previous spar with Kane, where he successfully manifested a powerful surge of wind.
A memory of a past battle reminds Louis that he has already sensed a strange power.
Louis feels a dark, cloudy force smothering his mind and vows to fight through the mental suppression.
Louis grits his teeth and asserts that his will is too strong to be broken so easily.
Louis shouts a command to blow the darkness away as a massive blue energy blast erupts.
A colossal explosion of white and blue light originates from Lewis, blinding everyone in the hall. The intensity of Louis' release shatters the floor tiles and creates a massive magical shockwave. A pillar of pure light reaches the ceiling, signaling an awakening of unprecedented and overwhelming scale.
Louis' eyes sparkle with starlight as he realizes he has finally breached the mental barrier.
Louis observes 4 distinct colors of light floating before him and realizes these are the elements.
The priest is stunned that Louis escaped the magic circle he secretly set up for mental isolation.
Louis reaches his hand out toward a bright blue orb of light floating in the dark space.
The blue elemental orb dodges Louis's hand, flying just out of reach as he tries to catch it.
Louis expresses confusion and frustration that he can sense the elements but is unable to touch them.
Multiple orbs of light swarm around Louis as he continues to struggle with the difficult ritual.
Louis complains that the situation is becoming a pain while Kara Candace watches him from nearby.
The priest gloats about using a special confinement circle to block the flow between spirit and element. The instructor reveals he used a magic forbidden orb to intentionally weaken Lewis's link to the elements.
The priest looks down at Louis with a smirk, blaming the boy for making too many enemies.
The priest admires his new gold rings, confirming he accepted a bribe to ensure Louis his failure.
The moon shines brightly in the night sky as the day of the ritual finally concludes.
Students arrive at the Grand Academy building as twilight settles over the ornate architecture.
Onlookers dismissively label Lewis a nobody while praising Neil as the only student worth watching.
A student expresses deep disappointment, having previously believed that Lewis was actually a magical genius.
Louis remains intensely focused while Kara Candace watches him with a silent, observant gaze.
Kara Candace stares forward with a piercing look as the ritual tension continues to build.
Kara alerts Lewis to an anomaly beneath them, prompting Lewis to question what is wrong.
Kara Candace identifies the magical signature hidden beneath the floor tiles as a deliberate trap.
Louis glares with sudden realization, his expression darkening as he understands the gravity of the sabotage.
Louis stands up and prepares to deliver a powerful physical strike against the floor tiles.
A massive impact shatters the stone floor as Lewis punches the ground with overwhelming force.
Lewis stares in shock at the discovery revealed within the wreckage of the broken tiles. A glowing purple magical seal is exposed, confirming the presence of a hidden confinement trap. Kara Candace urges Louis to act quickly and retrieve a specific item from the revealed compartment.
Louis smiles confidently while thanking his roommate for the critical information that saved his ritual.
Louis stands over the broken floor, questioning why such a devious item was placed there.
Louis looks up with suspicion, wondering if the sabotage was a coincidence or targeted.
Louis dismisses his worries and prepares to finally begin the true phase of his awakening.
Louis stands focused as a bright aura surrounds him, signaling the start of the actual ritual.
Multiple colored streaks of light zoom through the dark space as elements respond to his call. A swirling vortex of elemental energy begins to gather speed around the meditating student.
Louis is centered within a massive whirlpool of light that dominates the entire ritual hall.
The intensity of the elemental manifestation increases, creating a brilliant display of raw magical power. Students react in shock, noting that Louis' vortex is just as powerful as Neil's.
The priest is horrified that Louis managed to bypass both the confinement circle and the orb.
A mysterious gloved hand unexpectedly drops onto the shocked priest's shoulder, startling him mid-thought. The principal reveals himself and sternly commands the trembling priest to immediately stand down.
The priest bows submissively to the principal while sweating profusely from the sudden confrontation.
Students gossip about the principal's arrival while the priest walks away, fuming over his failure.
The priest reflects on how his sabotage plan was nearly exposed by the principal's intervention. The priest walks alone through the quiet academy grounds as the ritual continues behind him. The priest meets with a shadowy figure seated by a fountain in the moonlight.
The priest reports his failure and demands distance while the seated man agrees to finish things. The brown-haired student scowls at the priest's departure, cursing Louis for his supposed luck.
The principal monitors the situation, instructing an unseen Kylie to watch a student named Sid.
The principal expresses satisfaction that he has cleared the path for Louis to succeed.
The principal watches from afar as Louis sits within a towering pillar of rainbow light.
Louis remains in deep meditation as the swirling elemental forces reach their peak intensity.
Louis floats in a mental void, recalling Kane's past lessons regarding the nature of the elements.
In a flashback, Kane explains to Louis that elements are the goddess-created foundation of their world.
Louis questions why humans require a ritual when monsters possess innate magical abilities from birth.
Kane elaborates on the biological differences between humans and the monsters that inhabit their world.
Kane explains that monsters have high affinity because they contain magic crystals within their bodies.
A narrative illustration depicts a mermaid utilizing the power of a magic crystal for her spells.
Kane describes how the ritual allows humans to be recognized by elements and manipulate nature.
Flashback Louis examines a magic crystal, wondering if they represent the physical form of elements.
Kane concludes his lesson by stating that every object in existence is composed of these elements.
Back in the present, a blue orb hovers near Louis, making him wonder about water compatibility.
Louis reaches out a single finger to gently touch the glowing blue orb of water energy.
A vision of mermaids appears as Louis successfully connects with the water element's ancient power.
The elemental connection deepens as the image of the mermaid fades into the ritual energy. A massive, multi-eyed monster looms in the darkness as the ritual enters a dangerous phase.
Louis stares in terror as the spectral creature's glowing eyes pierce through his mental void.
Louis screams in agony as a sudden surge of raw elemental power consumes his body.
An explosion of fire and light erupts around Louis as he struggles to maintain control.
The very essence of the world manifests, swirling violently around the struggling young student.
A core elemental symbol emerges, representing the goddess's will during the peak of the ritual.
A mysterious eye flashes with a brilliant purple light, signaling a deeper level of awakening.
Louis sits at the center of a massive elemental storm that dominates the entire cathedral.
The principal senses the escalating magical pressure and realizes the situation is becoming incredibly dangerous.
Louis grits his teeth and pushes past his limits as his body glows with energy.
The principal urgently summons a divine barrier to protect the academy from the ritual's fallout. The principal commands a seal to be placed, unleashing a massive golden array of light.
Standing before the goddess Gaia, the principal channels his magic to stabilize the volatile room.
Two separate magic circles activate on the floor, glowing with elemental fire and water energy.
A massive glowing cube forms around Louis to contain the explosive output of his awakening.
Louis groans in pain as lightning-like energy surges through his eyes during the intense process. Students watch the blurry spectacle, expressing confusion about why the principal had to seal the area.
The principal shouts for Louis to remain calm and avoid being swayed by the surrounding chaos. Louis reacts with shock as his power begins to transform his physical and mental state.
A close-up of Louis's eye shows a sudden shift as he finally regains his composure.
Louis finds himself in a tranquil starlit void, relieved that he nearly lost his mind.
Louis examines a glowing elemental orb, noting its complex internal structure and its pulsing light.
Louis realizes that the elements are remarkably similar to the fundamental particles of his previous world.
Louis hypothesizes that manipulating the frequency of these particles could allow humans monster-like magical control. A single elemental orb begins to hum and vibrate in the palm of Louis's hand. The small orb suddenly splits into several distinct gems, each representing a different elemental force.
Louis successfully manifests symbols for earth, water, fire, and wind simultaneously in the starlit void.
Outside the barrier, the principal continues to struggle against the massive pressure of Louis' power. The principal prays for divine intervention as a new wave of golden energy fills the hall. A massive swirling vortex of water and wind erupts from the center of the ritual.
Onlookers react with sheer terror, noting that Louise's awakening has completely eclipsed Neil's previous performance.
The principal smiles with admiration, noting that the young boy has completely exceeded his expectations.
Louis concludes his scientific analysis, deciding that magic and elementary particles share the same essence.
Louis realizes that mastering this flow will allow humans to utilize magic as easily as monsters.
Strands of rainbow energy flow through Louis's body as he aligns his breathing with his qi.
Louis vows to create a magic crystal within himself to master advanced Qigong-style magical techniques.
Multiple beams of pure elemental light converge on Louis's forehead as he focuses his concentration.
A blue snowflake symbol manifests in Louis's eye, marking the birth of a rare attribute.
Sharp shards of ice suddenly explode around Louis, signaling his mastery of the frost element.
A colossal explosion of blue light and ice shatters the floor and shakes the cathedral.
The principal watches in shock as the protective barrier is easily breached by the icy surge. A freezing storm begins to circulate throughout the hall, manifesting the true scale of power.
Louis levitates high above the ground, surrounded by a swirling cyclone of ice and wind.
The principal looks up in awe as Louis displays a level of magic previously thought impossible.
Louis floats in a trance-like state, his body radiating a calm but overwhelming divine energy. Terrified students scream for help and run as ice spikes manifest across the stone floor.
Several students are trapped within pillars of ice as Louis's power freezes everything it touches.
The ritual hall is transformed into a beautiful but deadly frozen landscape under Louis's command.
A team of talented individuals gathers to showcase their skills in a colorful new world.
The principal realizes the situation is critical and immediately attempts to suppress the rampant power.
The principal offers a solemn prayer to the goddess, seeking a manifestation of divine power.
Chanting a protective spell, the principal summons an intense wall of flames to contain the energy.
A massive magical array erupts within the hall as the elemental forces struggle to stabilize.
Frozen shards litter the floor as the clashing energies of fire and ice create chaos.
Terrified students flee the ritual hall as the uncontrolled magical pressure threatens to collapse the structure. Louis stands firm at the epicenter, caught between the swirling vortices of fire and frost.
Louis remains eerily calm as the brilliant light of his multi-attribute awakening begins to fade.
A colossal pillar of energy pierces through the temple roof, visible from across the entire city.
The intense light attracts attention from scholars in their studies and commoners in the streets.
Inside the training room, Kylie stops her practice, sensing the overwhelming magical pressure from afar.
Louis walks toward the principal through the smoke and wreckage of the devastated ritual hall. The principal stands frozen in shock, feeling a chilling and unfamiliar element radiating from Louis.
Louis stands tall, his body still humming with the residual power of the rare awakening.
Louis observes elemental spheres merging in his hand, noting their incredible speed and perfect fusion.
A complex geometric array illustrates the harmonious alignment of the various elements Louis now controls.
Louis contemplates the scientific nature of magic, wondering if combining elements creates entirely new reactions.
Glowing energy pathways surge through Louis's body as he struggles to manage the massive flow.
Realizing the complexity of his situation, Louis decides he must speak with someone more experienced.
Louis looks up and realizes the principal is already watching him with a stunned expression.
The principal points a finger at Louis, demanding to know if he understands what happened.
Standing before the goddess statue, the principal maintains a defensive stance amidst the cooling hall. Louis stands alone in the center of the room, looking down at his own hands.
The principal lowers his hand, dismissing the golden crest as the immediate danger finally subsides.
The principal asks Louis if he truly comprehends the magnitude of the miracle he performed.
Louis looks at the unconscious students around him, unsure of how to explain the destruction.
Rubbing the back of his head, Louis sheepishly thanks the principal for his timely intervention.
The principal sighs and instructs Louis to follow him back to his office for privacy.
With a firm command, the principal leads the way out of the ruined ritual hall.
The principal notes that Louis must have many questions regarding his unprecedented elemental awakening.
The two walk through the silent, grand hall, passing beneath the towering statues of past masters. They exit through the heavy temple doors, leaving the site of the chaotic ritual behind.
In the study, the principal congratulates Louis and asks if he indeed awakened all 4 attributes.
Louis confirms the truth by manifesting 4 distinct spheres of elemental energy in his open palm. The principal praises Louis's talent, finding his instinctive control over the elements to be truly remarkable. He offers Louis a personal research journal to help the boy navigate his complex new powers.
The principal suggests Louis consult other specialists to master the fire and water elements he lacks.
The principal calls for Kylie, summoning his most trusted aide to enter the private office.
Kylie arrives in a swirl of wind, her sharp gaze immediately landing on the young student.
The principal formally introduces Kylie, identifying her as his most reliable and trusted magical aide. Louis watches carefully as the principal finishes his introduction of the skilled gray-haired woman.
Kylie approaches the group and suggests they relocate to a more secure and reinforced location.
They arrive at a fortified underground training room designed to withstand massive magical impacts and pressure. Kylie asks Louis to demonstrate the mysterious and chilling element he manifested during the ritual.
Louis explains that the new element was an accidental discovery made during the peak of awakening.
He describes the process of accelerating elemental movement to create a fusion reaction between his attributes.
Louis demonstrates the birth of a new force by swirling 2 different energies together with precision.
Louis reveals a brilliant blue shard of power, identifying it as the newly formed ice element.
The principal reacts with pure disbelief, having never heard of a human successfully mixing elements.
Kylie feels the freezing aura and acknowledges that the boy's power is indeed chillingly real.
A confident and competitive smile spreads across Kylie's face as she looks at her new ward.
Kylie leaps through the air with focused determination, demanding to feel the boy's raw power.
Louis and Kylie clash in a violent display of high-speed combat and swirling magical energy.
Kylie struggles to block a glowing blue punch as she feels the overwhelming force behind it.
Louis remains perfectly calm while channeling massive amounts of energy into his glowing, clenched fist.
Kylie reacts with shock as a sudden explosion of elemental force catches her completely off guard.
The two fighters exchange long-range energy blasts that illuminate the dark walls of the cathedral.
Kylie realizes her movements are slowing down, wondering if this frost effect is a new power.
Kylie asks about the history of fusing elements while the principal confirms its absolute rarity.
The principal explains that despite centuries of study, the secrets of magic remain largely elusive.
Standing before portraits of past masters, the principal notes that none ever successfully fused elements.
Most mages control only one attribute, and only a legendary few ever awaken to multiple. Even the strongest figures in history struggled with 3 attributes, often failing to fuse them.
The principal gestures to his head, explaining that a mortal mind simply cannot sustain such power.
Louis wonders if normal humans are physically unable to withstand the intense pressure of attribute fusion.
The principal confirms that wielding magic requires a body and mind capable of enduring elemental strain.
He elaborates that guiding accelerated elements requires immense willpower to avoid a fatal internal collision.
A diagram illustrates how colliding elements inside an unprepared mage would result in a catastrophic explosion.
The humorous illustration depicts the messy aftermath of a magician failing to control their internal energies.
Kylie listens thoughtfully as she begins to understand the terrifying complexity of Louis' unique awakening.
Kylie watches Louis with awe, realizing his potential might actually rival that of the Empire Saint.